new normal life of today,
Wait.
certain things have become. Are you okay?
Yeah, now we can. Now we can start.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Sorry. In this new normal life of today, certain things have become very common and very necessity. Wearing a mask, for example, is one of them. At times, it seems that this situation is as if something right out of a post-apocalyptic science fiction. But keep all this aside, the questions that keeps on brewing in our minds are like, where are we standing right now? What is the present economic and political condition? What will happen to us in the near future? Keeping all these questions and also many others in our mind, our today's webinar on post-lockdown political and economic situation in the context of COVID-19 chooses or aims to address in a subtle way. A very good morning to everyone present here. Our chief patron, Dr. Onul বিশ্বাস, Principal Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, our eminent resource persons, my respected colleagues, and all the dear participants who are watching us right now live from YouTube. Now, I would like to invite the convener of today's webinar, Shugandha Roy, my colleague and assistant professor and head of the Department of Political Science of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, to say her words. Shugandha Di, if you may please.
Thank you, Diditi. Uh, Very good morning and hello to everyone. My dear colleagues, my respected principal sir, and the distinguished speakers and dear participants. I welcome to all of you in this webinar. On behalf of Political Science Department, Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, today we are going to start today international webinar on post-lockdown political and economic situation in the context of COVID-19, an analytical discussion. It is a demand of the present situation to continue our academic discourse by the help of virtual world with a humanistic attitude. And that's why we organize such kind of webinar. I hope our initiative will do this positively and our distinguished speakers will enlighten us by their august deliberation. Thank you, all of you, for joining with us. I
Thank you,
would like
Shugandha. Okay,
to
yes. Okay. Thank you, Shugandhadi. Now, we would like to hear the inspiring, warm welcome wishes from the person who has been the on and on support, without whose encouragement this webinar would not have been possible. None other than our principal, sir, Dr. Onul Bishash of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya. We will hear his words right now.
Very good morning, everybody present in this virtual platform. I announce a hearty welcome on behalf of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya. Very good morning, everybody present in this virtual platform.
Shanu?
I announce a hearty welcome on behalf of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya to all my friends joined from various parts of the globe. Since 1965, our college has organized many seminars before. Along with our dignified teachers, many eminent professors, academicians came to attend and share their thought in the seminars in our college. Enthusiasm of our young faculty members, along with the experience of senior faculty members, our college exercises different initiatives. At present, whole world is suffering from corona pandemic. The situation is very tough, and in India, day by day, it is going to worst. No one knows what the fate of our beloved world is. What is the fate of our human civilization? But our hope is that one day it seems to be ended off. So that is the
Very
hope.
good morning, everybody.
That is the
Present
inspiration
virtual platform.
of this webinar.
I announce
And
a hearty
that is why
welcome
we are
on
going
behalf
to
of
organize,
Mahavidyalaya.
are going to discuss about
Join
the post-corona
from
situation.
various parts
The
of the
most
globe.
significant arena
Since
is
1965,
political
our
and
college has
economic
organized
phenomenon
many
of our
seminars
society.
before.
I would like to
Along with
thank
our
the
dignified
energetic
teachers,
faculty members of
many
Political
eminent
Science
professors,
Department for organizing this particular webinar. Though it is not possible to arrange the seminar physically
Hello.
in this corona
Hello.
pandemic situation. But
Hello.
I believe that this webinar would be
Very good morning,
a very contemporary of this moment.
And good afternoon.
It's a great
everybody.
pleasure
this
and
virtual
privilege
platform.
I welcome
to
you
me
all.
being a
this
part
hearty
of
welcome
this
session.
webinar.
I
I
welcome
I would
you
like
all
to
to this session
welcome
linked with this
all
international
the
webinar
eminent
on
guests
post-lockdown
speakers
political and
and thank
economic
them
situation
for
in the
sharing their
context of
valuable
COVID-19
time
and
thoughts
analytical discussion
and deliver speech.
organized
Digital
by the
Again,
Department of
I would
Political
like to
Science
put
of Panchmura
forward my
Mahavidyalaya,
heartfelt
Panchmura,
gratitude
West
to
Bengal.
them.
So please
I would like to
wait.
welcome
Yes, sir.
Activities
all the
of the
audience
first
for
day
their
has come
active
to the
participation.
concluding stage.
I am very
I
much
deem it
thankful
a great
to the technical team for their
I deem it
active
a proud
support,
privilege for me
without
that
which it was impossible to arrange this webinar. Finally, I wish a grand success of this webinar and like to congratulate all the people associated with this. Thank to all. And I declare the beginning of this webinar.
It's done, it's done.
Very good morning, everybody.
It's done.
Present virtual platform. I announce a hearty welcome on behalf of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya to all my friends join from various parts of the globe. Since 1960, our college has organized many seminars before. Along with our dignified teachers, many eminent professors, academicians came to attend and share their thought in the seminars in our enthusiasm of our young faculty members, along with the experience of senior faculty members, our college
I deem it
exercises
a proud privilege for me that the
initiative
organizing committee has given me the opportunity
present
to deliver the vote of thanks.
suffering from corona pandemic.
It is needless to mention how the people of different
Day
countries
by day,
are passing days in panic atmosphere after the outbreak of the killer virus COVID-19, a pandemic.
To host. No one knows what the fate of our beloved world is. What is the fate of our human civilization? But our hope is that one day it seems to be ended off. So that is the hope. That is the inspiration of this webinar. And that is why we are going to organize, are going to discuss about the post-corona situation. The most significant arena is political.
Have you streamed, sir, on YouTube?
Yes, we have already streamed this on YouTube.
We have already streamed sir's video on YouTube.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we have already streamed sir's video on the YouTube.
Yes.
Okay.
বলো যে অন যেন না
Yeah.
করেন।
Yes. We have
স্বপন
already
বাবু,
streamed sir's video on YouTube. Shapan sir, please, can you just, if you just put the thing in the mute, otherwise it will just combine. Uh, okay. Okay. Before entering our sessions, uh, I would like to request all the participants who are watching us right now on YouTube to please put your questions in the chat box so that it can be communicated to our resource persons at the end of the lecture. Death, life is something which, when we hear the word, the first thing that comes to our mind is that it is full of possibilities and hopes. But in the new situation, the thing that comes to our mind rather is that life is something which is opposite of the word death. On that very note, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Ajay Godavarti sir, Associate Professor, Central of Political Studies, JNU, New Delhi. His topic of discussion being life in the times of death. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dititi. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have taken a lot of trouble in these already troubled times to organize this webinar. And so what I'll do over next 20-25 minutes is to really look at what are the possible new rationalities of the state and capital that are being put in place in course of this pandemic. They are gradually developing discourses, narratives are already becoming the new common sense, and there is a possibility, and this is what I want to put it for discussion, open it up for discussion with other panelists, colleagues, and the participants, is that there seems to be a new kind of rationalities that the state would put in place in terms of its model of governance in the post pandemic period. And this is what I think as citizens we need to really keep a close watch. So I will flag off about 5 or 6 kinds of rationalities that are emerging that one can observe, which would otherwise be considered as an exception, are becoming a kind of a new normal in course of the pandemic. And my hunch is that the state and capital would pick on these and make these as new common sense, as the new hegemonic rationality. So let me begin with the first one. I think the first important shift that we are witnessing today in course of the pandemic is the sovereign state's abdication of the very basis of the social contract. The basis of the social contract with the state was its guarantee, that its ability or its promise to guarantee citizens freedom and security. Today, I think the state is moving to a kind of rationality where it is arguing or where it is projecting that it is governance without guarantee, that it can no longer guarantee the security of its citizens. The pandemic has brought in a new kind of a reality where state's governance model itself is moving towards some kind of a new idea that life will be without security, and that state simply cannot guarantee you that security with whatever resources it has. So I think we are now entering into a new kind of a rationality of life without security, sovereign that cannot guarantee the security, and therefore it is, in one sense, a kind of a neoliberal rationality that each one onto himself has to guarantee, and we are all responsible for our own selves. Uh, this partly is reflected in this a very interesting new book by Evan Adams, where he argues that resilience is the new category. So citizens are now expected to be resilient towards a permanent kind of a crisis. So it is no longer about mobility, it is no longer about new opportunities, it is no longer about guarantee of life, but it is more about the permanence of a certain kind of danger of death that is lurking around, that can visit any one of us. Any one of us can fall to this, and therefore we need to be resilient towards the situation of danger that is more or less now permanent. That therefore you can also see this emerging in course of the new statements that various ministers in various states, including Prime Minister, said that you'll have to live with COVID-19. In Telangana, the state that I come from, the health minister said that no, state can only do so much. Beyond this, we cannot guarantee anybody's life. Citizens have to take care, follow caution, follow the prescribed norms of wearing masks and other things, and take care of their lives. So this is, I think, a new kind of a rationality that state from the 20th century, which said that the legitimacy of the sovereignty was in terms of guaranteeing a certain kind of a security. Today's state is finding a new rationality of moving beyond that security. So that's my first point. So this is different from what Foucault would argue, that the regulation was based on security and welfare. The 19th and 20th century state emerged in terms of regulating its citizens, disciplining its citizens based on the rationalities of welfare and security. Today, I think we are moving beyond to a new kind of a regulation where state would, through its surveillance mechanisms, without guaranteeing security and mobility. So surveillance without guarantee of security and mobility. So that's my first rationality, that there is a possibility of emerging post-pandemic. Second important rationality that one could observe was the distinction between the social and the natural is collapsing. uh, if you observe in course of the pandemic, anybody could have fallen victim to the vagaries of this virus, COVID-19. Whether it is the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, entering into ICU, or whether it is AAP's health minister who was in ICU, or whether it's a migrant on the road, that everyone is in one sense equally vulnerable to facing death. So I think what this intimates is a kind of a new rationality that nullifies social hierarchies. That social hierarchies, whether you are rich or poor, whether in terms of your caste, whether in terms of your gender, it does not really matter, because the pandemic is the virus itself, the nature of the virus is very random. It is mutating quite fast. Earlier, we thought that younger people would not be affected. Now we are told that young are as vulnerable. Earlier, we were told the children would not be affected, but now we are told that children below 10 are actually more vulnerable. There is a certain kind of randomness to the way the virus operates, and therefore I feel that the social hierarchies that existed, the way we understood the idea of the political, I think it would have a major influence through
अच्छा
this,
तो और ये टॉप
through the way we are approaching the pandemic, the way we are approaching coping with the virus, that it does not matter who you are. Therefore, for the state, it actually does not matter what is your social location. That it almost implies that each one of us, irrespective of class, caste, and gender, are equally vulnerable to the virus. And therefore, I think this is a kind of a new rationality where I see a possibility that the social uh, is almost obliterated from the idea of the political. That is, in other words, the social hierarchies do not really immediately influence our idea of power, our equation with the state and capital. And this, I think, would be a very important rationality that the state would pick up, which might have implications of depoliticizing ideas of development, growth, so on and so forth. And this, I think, is also converging with the ecological crisis, that planetary crisis of ecology also in one sense informs us that social hierarchies, social locations do not immediately matter. So we'll have to think of what politics will look like, what our equation would with the state will look like, what would citizenship mean in a situation where we are told that social hierarchies does not matter, that it does not matter if you are poor because you are as vulnerable as the rich. It does not matter if you are a common man, it is you are as vulnerable as those in places of power. So I think one has to think how this kind of a narrative, this kind of a rationality that has emerged in course of the pandemic, which will pan out in the post-pandemic period. My third proposition of the new rationality that is emerging in course of the pandemic is that crisis and a kind of a state of exception are, I think, now becoming permanent. That one of the things that is emerging out of the pandemic is that crisis is no longer an aberration. Breakdown of civic social life, sense of collective, I think is no longer an exception and an aberration, but I think is a permanent mode of life that we will be living in for a long time. This pandemics have happened in history, but I don't have the time to get into that. So what the crisis teaches us is that, or the new mode of governance that is emerging from this kind of a permanence of crisis, is that state of exception is the new normal. That the sovereign would now rule through a permanent state of exception. I think this very interestingly converges with the populist authoritarian model that emerged in last few years all over the world. That we can see in India that the mode of governance of the current regime is by exception. We are moving from one kind of an exception to the other, where what Carl Smith refers to as where you have a sovereign dictator. A sovereign dictator is someone who rules by exception, not by constitutional norms. By ruling by exception would mean that you always breach the available constitutional norms. You argue with your citizens that breaching the available constitutional norms, laws, rule of law is a necessary mode to maintain order and achieve higher growth and higher opportunities, higher mobility for the nation. So the new nationalism that we are witnessing, the hyper-nationalism we are witnessing today, is in terms of justifying a state of exception. That in fact institutions, constitution are a kind of a break, or a kind of a stumbling block for faster mobility. So it's very interesting to see how the rationality of populist authoritarianism that through a sovereign dictator is converging with the rationality of the pandemic. That the pandemic also is telling you that this is not something that we are going to overcome in the near future. Even if one was to have the vaccine, it is not something that it is over. One has to live. Some countries have already passed the legislation saying that it's mandatory to wear the mask for next 1 year. So there is a kind of an uncertainty, and therefore the decisions that the sovereign makes have to be unpredictable. And that's how you saw Prime Minister Modi announcing a lockdown with just a 4-hour notice. So it is more the demonstration and the performance of the sovereign is more in terms of unpredictable decisions rather than the predictability of institutions, unpredictability of action rather than sustained policy. So policies, institution, law, constitutional frame, more or less becomes a kind of a impediment, and the sovereign therefore gains his legitimacy by taking unpredictable decisions, and unpredictable decisions that are not geared towards overcoming the crisis, but that is in terms of coping with the crisis. Therefore, you will have, I think, this kind of mode of governance where where unpredictability is a norm. Crisis and unpredictability are the norm. I think will become more or less a permanent feature of Indian democracy, because the pandemic has informed us that the death itself is unpredictable. That who would be affected at what point in time perfectly healthy people are suddenly dying. Those who have tested negative are testing suddenly positive. Those who have tested positive in second test are testing negative. So there is a kind of unpredictability of death, and therefore I think the model of the governance is taking an imprint rather than saying that we will fight it through better medical facilities, through more sustained institutions, through more collective effort, through a form of civic solidarity. I think the unpredictability is becoming overwhelming by the nature of the death itself, the intimidation that it is creating through the nature of death. And therefore, my third proposition would be that crisis, state of exception under a sovereign dictator, through which is converging with very interestingly, very intriguingly with the populist authoritarian model. And therefore, this pandemic, in one sense, has actually justified lot of rationalities that were being built during the last of the populist phase of democracy in the last 5 years all over the world, whether it's Trump in the United States, Boris Johnson in UK, or Mr. Modi in India. That what was happening, and we were negotiating with those rationalities, we were critiquing them, so on, understanding them as populist upsurge. Today, you can see that there is a new kind of a justification that they have found in the way the virus acts and the way the pandemic and the lockdown has been imposed. So this is a new kind of a convergence that we will see where crisis, unpredictability, a sovereign dictator might be a new normal for a very long time to come. My fourth proposition, in terms of the fourth kind of rationality that is emerging, again very interestingly converges with the populist authoritarian model, is in terms of the place of knowledge, which is also linked, therefore, to the place of higher education in India and elsewhere. That one of the sustained aspects of enlightenment, modern state, was in terms of enlargement of knowledge, more research, scientific thinking, rationality, reason, and so on and so forth. If you observe closely that what has been actually instantiated in course of this pandemic is that knowledge will always be contingent and inadequate. That our knowledge of the virus today is absolutely inadequate. It also informs us our previous knowledge of science hasn't really helped us in understanding the process of mutation or how this virus is behaving. So knowledge has suddenly come into a certain kind of a question that science and knowledge can no longer really assure us a kind of a linear cumulative development. That knowledge does not necessarily assure us a very secured life. Knowledge does not necessarily mean that we are better off. So this is again very interestingly converges with the populist, authoritarian, anti-elitist logic that they have mobilized in the last 4 or 5 years. That they have pitched a common sense, populist reasoning as against legal, rational reasoning. So now we can see the pandemic, in one sense, I would argue, is I think pushing that logic further. That our trust on science and knowledge, even if we have not lost it fully, we cannot be fully assured. That we cannot be fully assured of science and knowledge, and our past knowledge has really not helped us in terms of fighting or coping with this pandemic. We are told that vaccine will take a long time, and we are not very sure how that is going to turn out to be. I think this, in one sense, my hunch is that would have some impact on the way we would approach higher education in India. And this is important because we are holding this webinar in a educational institution with, I'm sure, perhaps with most undergraduate students, is that higher education is now not the new guarantee of anything. That education itself is not a guarantee for anything. Therefore, I think this might have, I mean, it will develop. Already the populist, authoritarian, right-wing regimes were moving very fast in terms of clamping down on institutions of higher education. I'm sure you would know, this coming from somebody working in JNU, that what has been the sustained kind of an attack on JNU, on Delhi University, on IIT, so on and so forth, I think now we are finding a new kind of a rationality of populist logic there, that higher education need not necessarily be the goal of majority of population. There's nothing so mystical, that is not nothing so mythical about higher education. That being part of institutions of higher education at one point in time, doing a PhD was considered a very rare thing and a very revered thing. I remember once I was in London, walking on a street, started talking to a stranger, and I was then in those days doing my PhD. I went there for to be part of take resources from a British library. When I informed the stranger that I'm doing PhD, he almost stopped for a minute and he said, "Oh, this is a very rare thing," and all that. So I think that kind of a reverence that we had as part of the Enlightenment traditions towards higher education, to research, higher goals of knowledge, I think today are under sustained stress. It was under sustained stress to the neoliberal logic, to the new sovereign, populist, authoritarian sovereign that emerged in the last 4 5 years. And then what has happened is that in its place you have now more populist kind of popular reasoning that is replacing this kind of an enlightenment, legal, rational reasoning. And the pandemic, in a sense, perfectly fits. We thought that technology and science would come to our rescue, but now we can clearly see that that insecurity will continue for a long time, and therefore our very approach to knowledge and its impact on higher education, I think, are going to change in a very substantial. It might have a dramatic impact on the social policy. That state might tomorrow reason that education, and especially higher education research, need not be the priority of the state. Instead, it could be to the catering to the more majority group by offering populist reasoning, creating new myths, the way we approach the pandemic by Prime Minister asking us to light candles, by clanging thalis and things like that. I think these have certain kind of a mythical appeal to majority of population, and this, I think, will have some impact on the social policy of education, especially of higher education institutions. We are already told we are asked to move towards online mostly. There is privatization of education. There might be more disinvestment in public institutions and colleges and universities. So that's my fourth proposition. My fifth proposition is in terms of moving from the universal to the selective. Citizenship, as all of you would know, that is based on a certain kind of a universal rationality, a certain idea of universal inclusion, irrespective of all social location, so on and so forth. But what the pandemic interestingly has put in place is already a sense that not everyone can be saved immediately. So if you follow the discussion on the vaccine, on one hand we are told that the vaccine will come by early 2021 or something like that, but corroborative corollary narrative about the vaccine is also that even if the vaccine comes, we are not going to have immediate enough number of vaccines to cater to everyone. So the question that is being repeatedly asked is that who should get priority in terms of this vaccine? Who should be given this vaccine first? So sometimes we are told it should be the soldiers on the war front. Sometimes we are told it is the police. Sometimes we are told it is the doctors and the nurses who are saving lives. So I think in general, what this will tell you is that a certain kind of selective profiling is almost has almost become necessary. It is not that the state is imposing as a choice, but it's almost necessary for the state to make a certain kind of a priority. That it has to prioritize the health workers over common citizens. It has to prioritize citizens and armed forces over the citizens, so on and so forth. So universality as the basis for citizenship as part of our liberal democratic procedure. I think today, in one sense, gradually the populist authorities were already clamping down, but the pandemic, I think, has further pushed that logic that it is almost now common sense that no state will have, forget developing country like India, even advanced countries like the United States, would not have sufficient institutional resources to cover everyone, to give safety and security to everyone. So it has to be selective. It is something like the Titanic movement. If you have observed, if you watch the movie Titanic, when the ship is sinking and you have only so many lifeboats, you'll have to make a criteria that who would get that first. And in that movie, of course, it was women with children. So the logic so far of even in terms of selective inclusion, even under liberal citizenship, was in terms of the most vulnerable should get the priority. But today, I don't think the under the new populist right-wing regimes, the selectiveness that the pandemic is pushing would prioritize the vulnerable, and we could clearly see that in the way the migrants were treated. Those living abroad were offered the flight, and our local migrants here in India were absolutely neglected, and there was a kind of a low-key, low-intent spectacle created for about 2 months, where we were every day watching migrants returning to their hometowns, falling on the way, dying of fatigue, dying of hunger, so on and so forth. So this, I think, has clearly justified to us that the vulnerable will have to take the social cost of this uncertainty and lack of resources, paucity of resources, and paucity of institutional functioning. Therefore, I think the logic of surplus population, that there will be populations within a nation which have to be dispensed with. This was the logic that in India it was emerging through the discourse of hyper-nationalism and communalism. We were already instantiating that religious minorities, especially the Muslims, were the surplus populations which have to be dispensed with, which have to be pushed out of the economy, and so on and so forth. I think the pandemic, in a very insidious way, is further instantiating that logic of surplus populations, that we have to dispense with certain populations because we cannot simply afford to take care of everyone. Certain groups have to get priority over others. I think this pandemic has already pushed that logic, and the state and the capital are only waiting to sort of feed on that logic and further normalize this condition of what I call the righteous lawlessness. That there is a righteousness to this kind of a lawlessness. There is a kind of a righteousness, a moral valuation of exclusion, that you have to exclude for the rest to survive. So you'll have to prioritize health workers for the rest of the population to survive. You will have to remove the religious minorities from formal economy. They can be termed as termites, infiltrators, so that the majority Hindu are more secured and economically prosperous. So this, I think, pandemic is again quite insidious in terms of the way it is pushing us away from this logic of universality to the logic of selective. And very interestingly, if you want me to sort of complicate it further, this is the choice that the state has to make. It is a choice we need to make in terms of who to exclude. Earlier, the element of choice was in liberalism, was for more autonomy and for more universality. But today, you can see that the element of choice would turn on its head, and therefore, it is the choice we need to make as who to exclude. So tomorrow, imagine in India, the pandemic, we have a vaccine, and we have only so many limited vaccines, and state, if state is forced to deliberate who should be given these vaccines first, which areas, for instance, should the vaccine be immediately available. I think many of us would have little doubt that the highly populated Muslim areas would be the first target which can be excluded, by some rationality of some kind, which they might develop some moral valuation. But the exclusion itself, the idea here is that exclusion itself has now today become a kind of a justified logic of the state. I'll conclude by putting in my sixth rationality in place. I think by and large, the pandemic has sort of hit on our idea of the collective basis of democracy. I think one of the important resources for any democracy is the idea of trust, civic trust. Whether it's the principle of secularism, whether it's constitutional morality, they're all in various complex ways based on micro, everyday trust relations between citizens, and therefore, and that trust goes with a certain kind of welfareism. I think there cannot be a better example than the place that I'm speaking to, Kolkata, where I lived for a couple of years, where you found those kinds of civic trust, that communitarian celebration. I really enjoyed my stay of 2 years in Kolkata. I think there's no other city like that where people with even little resources, but there was a kind of a deep trust, civic trust that one could find between citizens, a communitarian bonding across religions and castes in Kolkata, which is very rare for a metropolitan city. It's like a village which is in a magnified form, looks like a city. It has very deep bonds, people trust, and I remember I lived in Salt Lake. If you go for shopping, the shopkeeper was less interested in selling, but he was more interested in giving you a discourse on Rabindra Sangeet, on which type of fish to relish at what type of the season. It was simply wonderful that you will hardly find this in Delhi, people who have no time to talk to. And Kolkata was a wonderful state. So those, I think that's the reason you can see that trust is linked to the kind of welfareism in West Bengal. That in spite of whether it's left or whether it's the current Mamata government, that those forms of micro trust that exist at the communitarian level push a kind of a welfare logic. That is also very similar to what's happening in Kerala, and you could see that Kerala could fight this pandemic much better than any other state, obviously backed by investments in health and institutional responses. I think the pandemic, in final sense, I would argue, has hit this idea of trust in a very big way. That it is already almost institutionalized a certain kind of social distancing, suspicion. We have to be cautious with each other. I remember even with my own family that if I go to Hyderabad, my family is now telling you have to be in quarantine. We don't know what you're carrying coming from Delhi. So it's by default that one is distanced emotionally, socially, mutually from each other. And this is simply what the current nature of predatory capital and the kind of sovereign state that we have already been doing that. So you could see that logic of communalism and pandemic were running parallel in India. The logic of Tablighi being responsible for the spread of virus that happened in the initial part went along. So this lack of trust is becoming more and more generic. Therefore one has to be very conscious that this erosion of these kinds of collective forms, I think, might stay here for a long time, and therefore we will have to look. If some of my analysis, that is a part of this analysis, is right, then I think we'll have to look for new forms of trust, new forms of collective solidarity to really turn back and push back these kinds of new rationalities that the state is putting in place. I think this I'll stop here and leave it to you here.
Thank you very much, sir, for your really informative and enlightening words. The thing is, we have got a lots and lots of questions. And before that, I would ask if any of the resource persons who are present in the meet, if they want to ask any questions, then we can start with the chat box questions. Anybody who wants to ask? Please,
Yes,
sir.
Diditi,
Yes.
can I ask question?
Yes, sure, ma'am.
Okay. I ask you do you think, sir, the sovereignty of Indian state is in danger due to this COVID pandemic situation? And second question is that insecurity can cause authoritarianism in India. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you're right. So I think those are valid questions. I think insecurity has already, has grown. You can see in the populist authoritarian regime, one of the basis of this current political regime in India we have is widespread insecurity among especially the middle class, and then now that is spreading to other social classes. And the nature of very rule of the current political regime is to further instantiate and further heighten nature of insecurity. So obviously you're right that insecurity is the basis, and pandemic has only further helped that insecurity. And your first question, yes, no, it's not about sovereign being under threat. It's about citizens being under threat from the sovereign, and that's what is emerging. That we are moving towards undermining institutions, constitutional frame. We are now, the new common sense is that all these institutions, policy, constitutional frames are impediments. They are not going to help us face pandemic. What you need is a singular titular head, a sovereign who can take decisions in an emergency situation. So this whole way of lockdown No thought went into it. And lockdown is meant all over the world as a preparation for better medical facilities. India is only strange country where you have lockdown without any preparation. You just sat and you thought the virus will die. So the cases went down, and then you opened the lockdown, and the cases are back. So I mean, there was no backup of medical. There was no extra investment in health facilities. There was no thought process. So you're already governing in a crisis mode, and therefore that crisis mode justifies a strong man. So people who tell you on the streets, Modi ji kuch na kuch karenge. So Modi ji will come on TV and suddenly announce lockdown ho gaya. Suddenly will say kal lockdown lift ho gaya. Then he will say aap khud survive karo. Every day it's a new emergency situation, and you're in that emergency. You cannot afford to question the leader because already you are in a crisis. So by questioning the leader, so people are telling me when I'm announcing these talks on Facebook, people are saying already we are in crisis and you're giving all these talks. This is not the moment to discuss. This is the moment to be in the borders. This is the moment to be look at the health workers. They're risking their life while you guys are sitting here giving webinars, discussing. So all this becomes, extra legally. All this is illegitimate in one sense of what we are doing because there is a huge crisis waiting, and this is not the moment to discuss. This is a moment to act, and who will act? It is the sovereign head.
Actually, sir, I want to say the sovereignty of the people of India is in danger.
Well, but the sovereignty of people is in danger from the sovereign head, not from China.
Yes, sir. Somehow the idea of trust is in danger. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for answering me. And thank
So,
you, sir.
in this context, I will ask one thing. So, do you think that this is slowly becoming the new normal, this kind of control that are being exercised on the people? And do you think in the future, the necropolitic future, rather, I will say, that this kind of, people will be slowly reduced to bare lives? Like you were talking about state of exception. I'm just asking, do you think that slowly we will be reduced from our essence to mere bare lives?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the crisis could be bigger than even bare lives. The government's idea of bare life is that your physical security is assured without legal and
Hmm.
social status.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Everything else is removed. But here
This is
we are moving even further. That you are not even being assured your life. So the very basis of social contract, origin of liberalism, of right to life, today is under a legitimate, a righteous threat. It is not that you are going to lose your life through a war or an illegitimate attack, but it is that the life itself is uncertain, and therefore state and sovereign cannot guarantee your right to life. So, and it looks perfectly commonsensical that if you or me today, tomorrow are affected by the virus and we lose our lives, state cannot be held responsible for this. It is our individual, at the best, individual responsibility, or it's simply the uncertainty of life. So there is a kind of a new nihilistic logic that is emerging that life cannot be certain. So one has to only cope. That's the idea of the resilience. That one has to only learn techniques of coping with this uncertainty. That uncertainty itself cannot be overcome. So this earlier liberal enlightenment logic that life would gradually become more secure, there will be a sense of mobility, and so on and so forth. Those are no longer the guarantees state is offering. That you, even after everything, you might suddenly get affected. Therefore, the stories, if you read in media, the way they are being covered, that somebody is standing in the line, perfect, suddenly collapses and dies. Somebody has tested negative in the hospital, comes back home, collapses and dies. Somebody as young as 35 dies. Somebody who is at 90-year-old recovers from the virus and is doing well. So, I mean, so there is no logic to the way the virus is working, and this is precisely how the state wishes us to think. That is no longer about merely medical facilities. Even if you give more and more medical facilities, you cannot guarantee better health. That's what it's trying to tell you. Therefore, the crisis uncertainty is here to stay, and therefore, it's state is telling you good luck. It's not telling you that I am here to save you. But this logic in some ways spirals a need for a strong man. Uh,
exactly. Any other resource persons who would like to question, sir? Or we will go to chat box questions right now.
I cannot see the chat box questions.
Yes, you can, sir, if you go to the live streaming right now.
Where is that? Live streaming is, you mean the
So then
YouTube?
you have to, yes, sir. I will
Okay.
tell you the questions.
Okay.
So, Vishesh Gurjar, he has asked this question: if
Ah,
social hierarchies are nullified by the
ah,
virus, how come the politics in times of corona is
ah,
still in the hands of socially dominant people, be it through distribution of rations or helping the poor? We have
ah.
seen that even during lockdown, only the socially dominant were able to carry out political action by negotiating local state.
Okay. Vishesh is our student who is now at IIT. So let me answer him. No, the point is this, that social hierarchies obviously do not disappear. Social hierarchies matter. Social hierarchies will matter in the way state will dispense, will announce who are surplus populations, who are to be included, who will have better resources. After all, the rich, all said and done, will have a better chance of surviving than the poor. Will have better chance of taking better medical facilities. But the randomness allows the state to put this new rationality, to convince the and make it a new common sense, a new hegemony that that these social hierarchies actually don't matter. So at one level, it is not that the social hierarchies will be obliterated, but the rationality of the state would be that, look, it doesn't matter. President Boris Johnson was in ICU. Health Minister of AAP was in ICU. So they can pose a counter question to Vishesh that, if social hierarchies are all the thing that matter, how come these leading people with high security zones are affected by COVID? So there is a randomness. So the logic, rationality, the point that I was making is not to say that the social hierarchy have become irrelevant, but the rationality that the propensity for the new rationality to grow is that the state and capital will argue that social hierarchies do not matter the way they used to matter earlier.
Sir, there are two similar questions. Like Varsha Rani, she has asked, what will be the effect on the marginalized sections like Dalits, women, and unorganized workforce? Suhel Sen has asked, what are the possible livelihood challenges that the labor section of the population will face?
So I think vulnerability, I think the way women, Dalits, Muslims, and the organized sectors, I think it was already very clearly demonstrated in India that migrant population does not matter. I mean, I think the low intent spectacle of migrant workers dying on the roads, I think, was not a happenstance. I think it was a kind of a statement that the current mode of politics is making in terms of, as I said, inscribing this principle that certain populations will be dispensable. So it could be migrant workers, it could be crime-infected Muslims in Uttar Pradesh, it can be Dalits in Gujarat, it can be. So the point is that the rationality is to say that certain populations have to be dealt this way for the rest of the population to be secured. So I think the earlier question was through rule of law, that law is same to everyone. Law has to apply equal to everyone. Citizenship meant equal social and economic rights to everyone. So communalism did half the damage. The majoritarianism that in India did half the damage of last 30, 40 years of convincing that there can be certain social groups who may not be necessarily treated as equal citizens. I think the pandemic has further, or at least the way state will use the logic of the pandemic is to say that we will always live in uncertain future. Everyone is under threat, and therefore you need to make preference, and certain populations will might become dispensable.
So Shushanta Bhattacharya has a question. How far the notion social distancing is rational considering Indian reality?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what he means by that is that obviously people don't have the resources to maintain and have individual rooms. So most in malls and in slums uh, cannot afford to follow social distancing, and that's the reason we have moved to community herd logic from social distancing. Therefore, that is a question. Therefore, there is no policy frame that can be thought of. I mean, at least the state has not made any effort to think in terms of if this is the reality, ideally it should have been deliberated in terms of what kind of policies should we have in place when social distancing is not possible. Is it containment? Is it providing localized health facilities? Is it localized testing like Mohalla clinics in Delhi we had, which were fairly functional? But there is no thought that goes into all of this. This needs a lot of decentralization. Crisis situations actually tell you that a diversity of opinion and decentralized modes of governance help you better because people can take responsibilities at local level and begin to act. But that's not what we have. We are pushing in a reverse logic of more centralization. But a single leader will take all the decisions and now he's busy at the border. So when he's free, he might come and then think of the pandemic. He might be into something else. So we are just like sheep following wherever he goes. And there is no sustained policy deliberation anywhere that I see in India, in spite of this 6 months crisis that we have been. That how are we? Are we going to invest more in health? Are we going to open more health centers? There is no such policy.
So she has another question that do you think that global capital has been able to play a pivotal role in managing the pandemic crisis?
It's pivotal.
What does that question mean? I don't know. What does global
Do
capital?
you
How
think
is it
that
managing
global
the pandemic?
capital has been able to play a pivotal role in managing the pandemic crisis?
I
It
don't
is
think it makes much sense.
okay, sir. Then moving on to the next question, Pallavi Das, she asks, kindly elaborate on how populist regimes might use this to make lives more regimented under insidious in surveillance. Is there a way to avoid that?
Yeah, I think I'll have to repeat my entire talk. So that's my entire talk was based on that how the populist logic and the logic of the pandemic were converging. So yeah, I mean the last part of the question in terms of what way to avoid that is this. I think it's difficult to predict, but already I think there's been fair amount of civic damage in terms of trust. But we have had some social mobilization, anti-CA protests, and Pinjra Tod women, and I mean it's very difficult for me to imagine what can actually counter the intensity of this new logic. One possibility that seems to be emerging, which I see in this, even in the current regime, is that it had to fall back on some kind of welfareism to justify its governance. Even this regime, which has been so ruthless, finally the Prime Minister in his recent talk had to come out and announce that next 3 months there will be free rice and whatever some provisions that will be given to 80 crore people. So I think welfareism is some kind of a populist, in popular consciousness, popular reasoning, a rationality that we need to pick up to counter everything else that is happening. I don't think we can counter individually in terms of surveillance and all of these rationalities cannot be countered. These are very complex things in terms of how they're operating in. But I think the one good chance we have is more robust welfareism. Any state, any political party at the local or central level is that if they can come with a more robust, more radical welfareism, I think then people's imagination might take a dramatic shift.
So one more question, if we have time, we will ask. This is by Mandira Thakur. The logic of surplus population seems to be in an idea which does have enough grounding. Is it your imagination, or have you done? No, no, sir. This is. Oh.
It's okay.
She is saying that logic of surplus population seems to be an idea which does not have enough grounding. Is it your imagination, or have you done some real research?
What does she mean by real research?
Exactly. It's kind of a trolling question.
You tell her imagination is part of research.
Exactly, exactly. Hypothesis comes with that only first.
Exactly. How do you hypothesize without imagination?
Sir, this is Abhirbhav Bhattacharjee. He asked, if vaccine comes in post-COVID era, do you think that the welfare role of the state would increase in the distribution of vaccine, etc.? Something like that. He is a MPhil research scholar from BU.
Yeah, I've already explained that. The vaccine might come, but yeah, in ideal situation, a social democratic state, I would imagine, would say that free vaccines would be available for the most vulnerable, like the marginalized groups, the Dalits, and the informal labor and the rural poor, and then better off middle class like us should be able to buy it. or in a more subsidized way. But the current, I don't see the current regime whether it will follow that kind of a logic, or would say that the vaccine itself is in limited quantity, so it would say that we need to prioritize, and therefore in that priority it will use a nationalist logic like army and doctors would need. In that, it also therefore slip in and say that there certain social groups have to be necessarily marginalized, which I think a majoritarian logic can easily be linked to this usage of vaccines.
Sir, there is another question by Biplab Mondol. He is asking, is there an alternative rationality to resolve the security issues during pandemic?
No, it's not the question of alternative. Yeah, obviously the way we are framing the question of security itself, that the fact to tell a citizen for the state to abdicate its responsibility and to say minister after minister in every political party all across country to say that state cannot do this is, I think, no sovereign can afford to do that in an elected representative governance. No sovereign can say that it is not my responsibility to guarantee right to life. That's a very fundamental basis on which sovereignty is based. A sovereign legitimacy is based. Therefore, state has to be told that it has to do everything possible to bring back the guarantee of right to life. That you will have to invest, which simply means you have to invest heavy amount of GDP. 10% of GDP has to go into health, not into defense. Therefore, it's not a priority to have more defense deals. It is our priority is health and education. But the sovereign does not wish to do that, and therefore it is putting this new rationality and trying to make it a common sense that no, it's not possible, given limited resources, that we cannot guarantee you right to life.
So there is another question. I think there are also many questions, but I'm saying this one. Sharon Roy, he is saying that this state of insecurity, is it socially constructed or natural construct?
Well, as I said, that the randomness of the virus makes it. That's the reason I said that collapse between the social and the natural. That that the randomness of the virus makes us feel. But within that, obviously, there's a social logic that each one of us who are in middle class are able to preserve our health. Uh, 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 I mean, touch wood, by isolating ourselves in our houses, quarantining ourselves, eating healthy food, improving our immunity. So there is a social logic. The social has not fallen out, but the optics of it can be that in spite of doing all this, we are also in one sense vulnerable. If tomorrow I were to go out and contract with someone, or the health book comes home, or the groceries we take might still affect us, and we might be no more. This might be my last webinar. Who knows? So that logic exists, but in spite of that, there is a social logic operating, and therefore the state's responsibility is to say that this social logic is to we will enlarge that security net rather than saying that look, everybody is vulnerable, so there's nothing that we can do.
Thank you very much, sir, for the session. Now, Shugandhati, do we have more time, or do we go to the
I think we
Shugandhati?
should move to the next one.
Okay,
You
sir.
can start the next one.
Okay. Uh, the mere essence of being a human can be enjoyed, only when we have certain rights uh, that will become the mere necessity for our very existence, that are integral to us. On that very note, I would like to invite our next speaker, none other than Dr. Abdul Alim Sir. He's professor in Rajshahi University, Department of Law, Bangladesh. His topic of discussion is COVID-19 and human rights. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think the sound is okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm so delighted to see all of the distinguished guests, and especially Professor Ajay. And I hope it is a unique opportunity for learning and having some network, sharing our ideas and views. And thank you for calling me as a lecture on COVID-19 and human rights. And I'm so happy to, I would like to share with some experiences, actually stories about my, I work with in a organization that is non-profit organization, Quantum Foundation, and to do some work for humanity, and I will emphasis on those issues. This pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, has created a tremendous threat to global health and well-being of everybody. On March 11, 2020, WHO has declared the coronavirus outbreak a global pandemic as the virus rapidly spread out across the whole world and from China. And Bangladesh actually announced the first confirmed coronavirus case in this country on 8 March 2020. This virus was actually unknown to the world unless the Chinese authorities notified the end of December 2019 that a deadly virus spread through their community. And now the most burning question is the world is that how to stop the virus that is causing millions of people's lives around the world in a quarantine. And it is difficult to answer with one word that and we don't have any magical solution how to control or how to stop it. But there is one solution. What is it? That we can say and we can follow the natural food habits and methods that humans have been following for ages to boost their immune system. And this immune system, as it is known, played a vital role for overcoming all the past pandemic occurrences in the history when vaccines actually were not available. And therefore, until and unless we have an effective vaccine to overcome the present pandemic, the central player in fighting against the coronavirus would be our immune system. We should boost up this, and it would protect us from the deadly invader and can even be helpful as a therapy. And human rights, you know that human rights, right to life and duty to protect life. We are combating against COVID-19 to protect the lives lives of all human beings. Invoking the right to life reminds us that the states have a duty to protect human lives, including by addressing the general condition in society and that gives rise to direct threats to life. And the right to health is also the inherently added in the right to life. And COVID-19 is testing to the limit to the limit state's ability to protect the right to health. And every human being is entitled to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health conducive to living a life in dignity and with a good health. And everyone, regardless of their social structure and the economic structure status, should have access to healthcare facilities they needed. And the central challenge to freedom of movement and that actually controlling the virus and protesting the right to life means breaking the chain of infection because the people must stop moving and interacting with each other. The most common public health measure taken by states against COVID-19 has been restricting our freedom of movement. And actually we have to live in a home, stay at home in restriction and lockdown that are prescribing by our states. So actually this WHO declared this is a pandemic. Actually media and some other factors, they made it as a panic towards the people, and people are more panicked, and actually a lot of people are dying each month and each day. If I tell you in Bangladesh that every day to 2,500 people died each day. And if I calculate from January 1 to June 25, 2,56,000 people died other than pandemic COVID-19, that is heart attack, diabetes, malaria, stroke, or pneumonia, or dysentery. A lot of people are dying with this. Okay, but it makes panic to our mind, and how much panicked we are in, that I will tell that story. And my foundation, I work with a voluntary for a foundation, that is the Quantum Foundation, is a non-profitable foundation, and this fund works for humanity. And our team, we do have team in whole country in Bangladesh, that 6,100 volunteers are working actually, for the uh, for taking the farewell to the corona victims or deceased people, and their funeral process. We are helping with this, and our team, they got message from health ministry of health, and the process becomes easier when the deceased body is to be collected from the hospital. Otherwise, when the body is in a home or in a village or in a city building, there then arrangement something we have to make a different thing. Then sometimes police security we needed are required also when the dead body is in a city building or in a village residence, and volunteers reach there to the spot and collect the signature of the deceased guardians or their relatives in a particular form. And in most cases, family members and relatives, they abandoning the dead body alone, and they went away, and nobody is there, and we sometimes we find only guard or nobody is there and to sign in a form, and we do not find anyone, and we are facing this challenge. And then our volunteer wear PPE, the personal protection equipments, and spray disinfectant around the place of the deceased body. And after cleaning and bathing, the dead body is covered with a piece of cloth. And then it is carried in a polythene bag, then in an airtight and waterproof heavy bag into the car, according to the guideline of the WHO. In addition, in Rajshahi, I am living in this city, and we are arranged some kinds of financial assistance to some poor people, and we do some shops for families under lockdown, and cook for patients in the hospitals who could not manage their meals as because some days before it was closed, totally closed. The hotels and restaurants are totally closed. Now it is opening now, and our government has already taken a lot of measures to deal with this alarming situation, and to minimize the spread of the virus, the death causes by the virus. And the government imposed various restrictions, including mask wearing and shutdowns and social distancing. Unfortunately, all these restrictions are frequently violated by so many people because our peoples are not so aware on it. And now I will tell the heartfelt stories, incidents in our community that are actually how our mind stopped. And 65 years old woman belonging in an aristocrat family, and being also a relative of a very influential person, she and her family were respected in her neighborhood. At this old age, she was suffering from asthma and other complexities, and although she did not take any corona test, but she died of corona syndrome in his own home. And after his death, the scenery totally changed. Suddenly, she became a stranger to the people in his local area, and her neighbors who used to treat her so highly all this time, but they refused to go near her in panic, and her family contacted several places for funeral arrangement, but nobody come there. And eventually, our foundation came to rescue them, and they made all the arrangement with care and sincerity as like she was their own mother. And another story, an old woman, she dead. Her dead body was about to taken away for funeral. She had died from corona, and the quantum volunteer funeral team members lifted her coffin on their shoulder, but the dead body was too heavy for them to carry, and they needed one people to lift the coffin. So they requested her son to help lift his mother's coffin, but the 30-year-old doctor's son refused to carry his mother's dead body. He shouted out excuses to avoid touching her coffin. As the son refused, the volunteers asked the bystander to help them, but they refused to help as well. And so then our team, they explained in details that the entire coffin had been sprayed with disinfectant, and that is very much safe to touch the coffin. Then one people came forward to help. While the volunteers buried her dead body, the son stood outside the graveyard the entire time. His panic did not let him say a goodbye, a last word to his mother, or not even when her body was finally laid down in the grave and he did not come. And another story about a person, 50 years old man with corona positive. He was only suspected to have corona positive, where there were no test reports actually, and he had mild fever and some symptom. That day in the afternoon, he had gone to the bathroom and he died there. His dead body got all covered in urine and some stuff in the bathroom. From the afternoon till the night, his dead body laid there hours after hours, and no one came near, went near, and not even his wife. None of the neighbors came to help. But they helped dead body. His children were too young, and they were afraid to go near. Gradually, his dead body, this dead news spread out, and it reached to the Hindu portion. Actually, it was a Hindu people dead body, and they informed the police station, who notified the government officials, and then message came to our quantum volunteer funeral team, and the volunteers rescued his dead body from the bathroom and washed him clean, and then they prepared his body for funeral, and none of his family member came even during his cremation. And when it came to putting the ceremonial fire on his face, none of his family member came near, so the volunteers had to do it and place in replace of the family, and they complete his funeral. And these are the horrible stories that our skin horripulated to hear the story. Another real, actually I'm talking all these real stories which we observed and experienced to work with this dead body. Another young man, 25 years old. So that age was written in admission form in hospital. His full address was there. He died with coronavirus syndrome. After his death, suddenly all the family members disappeared, even his mother. And his mother, actually we know the mother who loved him so much, and actually they abandoned this dead body in the hospital, and doctor and hospital staff could not find anyone to hand over the dead body to anyone. So 24 hours passed, no one came for him. Then the hospital authority called the quantum volunteer funeral team, as the body had already started to decompose by then. And the volunteer team gave the young man a proper funeral, and he was buried in a graveyard in Borishal district, Borishal city, and nobody was there. So these are the things are happening in our real world. One day, one phone call was come from a university teacher. He phoned our team, and he requested our team to bury one of his relatives who died in public hospital in Dhaka. The team immediately reached the hospital. Then the university teacher who called to hand over the dead body to them, and but he clearly refused that none of his family members of the dead body would come to the hospital or even collect the death certificate. that they could only can do that, pay the hospital bills by Bkash or some electronic mechanism, and they paid these things to the hospital authority, and then hospital authority handed over the dead body to our team. The family members were requested over phone to our team that to give him a proper funeral and send them the pictures. As though the man was buried in the Raja Bajar Bodh Bhumi graveyard. That's a very renowned Bodh Bhumi graveyard because 71 incident. Without any family member there, and although his family member frequently calling to our team asking about the funeral and they like to get the pictures, but the shocking news is that on the next day, shocking news was waiting for us. The late man's son and his old elder brother, they actually lived in Dhaka. His son called to say that they badly needed the father's death certificate. And they wanted to collect that certificate from our office in Dhaka. And okay, we gave him the permission. His son came, and we shocked very much to watch a healthy young man coming to the office riding on his friend's bike to collect his father's death certificate. Whereas he, on the day before night, actually he could not come to see his father's face for the last time to or attend his father's funeral in the fear of corona. So why did he come to collect the death certificate? As we understand, because it was required to acquire his father's bank balances and the properties. Then the man actually who once had everything in the world, but he left the world with no one by his side. This horripilation, actually, horripilated stories we are talking and we are sharing with you. And lastly, I would say another is actually he was a deliverer in a small rented abandoned house in Rajshahi. He lived there with his children and wife. His family dependent actually daily income, and with his limited income and limited money. Actually, 2 years ago, he bought a small piece of land. Actually, that land is 634 square feet in total. Actually, very small land. He bought it. He thought that he will build a house for a good house for his children when they will grow up and when will be they highly educated. But after government declared the lockdown to control the corona spread, and his dream becomes mess, and because he was a deliverer, he could not go out for work. At time passed, his another shocking news was come that he affected with coronavirus, and his neighborhood learned it, that and they started abusing him and his family also. It became even more difficult to survive in his house. And a few days later, this 50 years old deliverer, he died. His family was now in trouble with these crops. And with these crops and dead bodies. And when notified from the Ministry of Health, this Quantum Foundation funeral team from Rajshahi went to collect the corpse. But reaching there, they faced a critical situation. The neighborhood neighbors, they were very aggressive and would not allow the corpse into and do not like to buried in their local areas graveyard. So when this situation was arised, then Rajshahi Police Commissioner, they came forward to help. With their help, the team was able to bury him in the corner of the land which he was buried, which he was born. And actually, God knows, and God chosen his own land as his last destiny. So, with a few words, I will conclude my deliberation and my thought and thinkings. That actually, the kind heart, your heart should be kind, and the brain. Actually, this combination these two combination makes the human being becomes a special one. You have successfully learned to keep your heart warm and cool with love and cool your brain. You can do everything. And the door to become the Superman is in front of you. Now, in this situation, COVID-19 situation, we need that superpower, that Superman. We need it with that we should not keep ourselves in a confine ourselves in our closed door. We should be generous with love and care with everybody, because love is everything. One biologist from MIT, Dr. Sriva, he said that virus actually does not cause any damage or death. What actually virus does, it can attack on the weak immune system. And Dr. Shiva, he also added and said the reason for weakened immune system are mainly obesity, because we're eating so much, we are taking fast food and lot of stuffs, the Coke, 7-Up, Pepsi, like this, diabetics, obesity, diabetes, heart diseases, and smoking. Actually, I can't change the present situation with my own way. So we have to let it be for the time being. Actually, I said one thing, that is the international politics, and also WHO is in there, and some media are involved with this politics that makes the whole world in a they said is a pandemic, and whole world is now in a quarantine situation. Actually, as Rabindranath, our Rabindranath Thakur, he said, cyclone became my companion. When we can't fight against the cyclone, we have to make cyclone is our companion. Actually, ঝড়কে পেলেম সাথী, ঝড়ের সাথে যখন আমরা লড়াই করতে পারবো না, ঝড়কে সাথী করে মেনে নেওয়াটাই ভালো. Actually, this is my great pleasure, and I thanked everybody, and my sincere gratitude to everybody listening my words. Thank you so much.
Um, Thank you, sir, for enlightening speech, especially when you said our Rabindranath Tagore. It was such a proud moment for both the Bengals. So now I will ask all of our resource persons if they have any questions, please.
Yes, I have a question. Dilipji, can I?
Yes, sure.
Uh, very thanks to Abdul Alim sir. আমি একটু বাংলাতেই বলছি স্যার, যেহেতু বাংলাদেশ থেকে এসেছেন, তাই অত্যন্ত আনন্দ লাগছে যে আপনি আমাদের সাথে জয়েন করেছেন স্যার। এক কথাতেই আপনি রাজি হয়েছেন আমাদের এই ওয়েবিনারে বলার জন্য। থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ফর দ্যাট। আপনাকে আমার একটা প্রশ্ন আছে। I have a question, sir, to you, that is declaration of pandemic is a political thing? Do you think that the declaration of pandemic, that COVID-19 is a pandemic, this is a political thing or political declaration, or it is really the need of health, to protect our health?
I think so, Didi, Shugandhar, Didi, I think so. This is my personal view, and I think so. This is a political thing, and also involve WHO, because of the lot of diseases are in the world, and actually SARS was there, SARS and MERS, that were actually so severe, and then that of COVID-19, and the mortality rate was high. But COVID-19 is not like that, and I say that the media also involved with this situation. Actually, এখন তো কথা হচ্ছে যে 1 বছর এরকম আমাদের থাকতেই হবে, জ্বর জারি হতেই থাকবে, এবং জ্বরের সাথে আমি যে রবীন্দ্রনাথের কথায় বললাম যে ঝড়কে পেলেম সাথী, এটাই কিন্তু এখন তারা বলছে, বিকজ অফ এটার অ্যাকচুয়াল হচ্ছে যে ভ্যাকসিন না আসা পর্যন্ত এটা মেনে নিতেই হবে। আমরা এটা যার ইমিউন নাই, থাকবে না, সে হয়তোবা, এবং এটা দেখা যাচ্ছে আসলে 60 উপরে যারা বয়স তাদেরকেই এটাকে বেশি অ্যাটাক করছে, এবং যাদের অলরেডি ডায়াবেটিক্স ছিল, হার্ট ডিজিজ ছিল বা অন্য কোনো শ্বাসকষ্ট ছিল তাদেরকে এটা অ্যাটাক করছে এবং মারা যাচ্ছে। যা হোক, প্রতিটা মৃত্যুই আসলে কষ্টদায়ক, কষ্টকর। আপনি দেখেন, আমি যেটা বলেছি যে বাংলাদেশে 1 জানুয়ারি থেকে 25 জুন পর্যন্ত 2,56,000 মানুষ মারা গিয়েছে, কখনো ম্যালেরিয়ায়, কখনো ডায়রিয়াতে। ইভেন আপনাকে যদি বলি এই লকডাউন অবস্থাতেও রোড অ্যাক্সিডেন্টে আমাদের মারা গিয়েছে 211 জন, এই তিন তিন মাসের যে হিসেবটা বললাম আমি। এবং ওয়ার্ল্ড ওয়াইডও আপনি দেখেন যে আপনার ম্যালেরিয়া, এইডস, অন্যান্য অসুখ বিসুখে কত মানুষ মারা যাচ্ছে, এবং প্রতিদিন বাংলাদেশে মারা যাচ্ছে 2560 জন মানুষ প্রতিদিন, এভরিডে দে আর ডাইং। বাট আমরা প্যান্ডেমিক তৈরি করে ফেলেছি, আমরা এমন একটা প্যানিক তৈরি করে ফেলেছি। কোভিড-19 মানে হচ্ছে এমন একটা কিছু যে আমরা একটা লাশ দাফন করতে আসবো না, লাশের চেহারা দেখবো না, তার মুখের দিকে তাকাবো না। আমাদের জঙ্গলে মাকে ফেলে গিয়েছে, বাবাকে ফেলে গিয়েছে ডাস্টবিনের পাশে, বিকজ অফ কোভিড-19। তার তো এই যে হরেবল সিচুয়েশন, অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমাদের মনটাই আসলে ভাইরাসে, আমাদের হৃদয়টাই ভাইরাসে এফেক্টেড হয়ে গিয়েছে, আমাদেরকে সেই জায়গাটা আসলে তৈরি করে দিয়েছে। কিছু কিছু ইন্টারন্যাশনাল পলিটিক্স তো অবশ্যই আছে। এটা 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 বেশ কিছু কিছু গবেষণা রিসার্চে এসেছে, যেটা আমি আপনাদেরকে একটু সার্চ করলেই বোঝা যাবে। বেশ কিছু গবেষণা এটা এসেছে, এই জন্যই দিদি অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমি বলছি যে অ্যাকচুয়ালি এটা প্যানিক তৈরি করা হয়েছে ইচ্ছাকৃতভাবে।
Okay. So we have a few questions chat box এ যেগুলো আছে, আমরা একটা একটা করে চেষ্টা করব বলতে। স্যার প্রণতা ভট্টাচার্য, বাঁকুড়া ইউনিভার্সিটি's assistant professor, she has asked, sir, is this COVID situation strengthening state laws and the state sovereignty is being reasserted, defying importance of IGOs?
I don't understand. The human sovereignty means what?
Is this COVID situation strengthening state laws and state sovereignty is being reasserted, defying importance of NGOs? Like, is it the importance of the states, their sovereignty are increasing, and the NGOs, NGOs as well as the IGO sovereignty, the importance are slowly decreasing, something like that she has asked.
Actually, every human being has own sovereignty, that he can move everywhere. In America, USA, they follow their own body and their own decision. They can go everywhere, as there in First Amendment rights. It describes that even if they don't like to live, they can die. The right to die is their fundamental rights. And actually, the laws regarding COVID-19, actually quarantine situation that not infected so many peoples, and they don't able to controlling the huge number of people, and people are not listening to wear masks, not to make a social distancing. So actually, its own sovereignty, your body, your decision.
So there is another question, like, what kind of measures do you take or do you suggest for psychological counseling of the caregivers who face the pandemic at its worst every day? Pallavi Dash has asked this question.
Yeah. Thank you. So very important thing, that psychological counseling is very important to the doctors, actually to the society. Society need counseling. Everyone need counseling. In a quarantine situation, people are very panicked because they're watching TV, that how many people died today and tomorrow how many people will die, and so this makes us so panicked. So actually we need counseling. Everyone should need it.
স্যার এক্ষুনি এরকমই একটা কোয়েশ্চেনের আপনি আনসার দিলেন, তাও আমি আরেকবার বলছি। সঞ্চিতা গুইন উনি বলছেন, স্যার, অ্যাজ ইউ সে দ্যাট ডক্টর সান রিফিউজ টু টাচ দ্য ডেড বডি অফ হিজ মাদার, so my question is, this virus not only weakening economy of our country but also severely affecting the social bond and relationship?
Really. Actually, this happened. তার মা ছিল ডক্টর সন্তান, 30 বছর বয়স, 30 years old ডক্টর সন্তান। অ্যাকচুয়ালি আপনি যেটা জেনে থাকবেন, বুঝে থাকবেন, WHO তারা এক এক সময়ে এক এক রকমের কথা বলছে। They are saying lot of things, যে প্রথমে বলছে যে ডেড বডি থেকে ছড়ায়, তারপরে বলছে ডেড বডি থেকে ছড়ায় না, 3 ঘন্টা পরে ছড়ায়, নানা রকম তারা এক্সপেরিমেন্টাল টকিং এন্ড কথা তারা বলছে। সো অ্যাকচুয়ালি ঠিকই উনি বলেছেন যে এটা উনি বলছিলেন।
Sir, another question from Shoykot Mondol. As we have time, so I'm just pointing this question also. How is it possible, he's asking, how is it possible when an informal daily worker doesn't have work or food or money, then love or affection does matter at all? If all this is there, then just please clarify, sir, this point of human, all this part.
Okay, delivery, you know that a lot of people are dying without not getting food, and they don't have money, and how they survive, and এই যে না খেয়ে মারা যাচ্ছে, অনেকেই মারা যাবে, এটা তো ঘোষণা করছে। আপনি দেখেন, আমাদেরকে কি বলেছে, কোভিড-19 কতজন মারা যাবে বলছে, ইন্ডিয়াতে এত লক্ষ মারা যাবে, আমেরিকাতে 25 লাখ মারা যাবে, বাংলাদেশে কোনো মানুষই থাকবে না। হ্যাঁ, এই যে দেখেন কি রকম একটা সিচুয়েশন, আমাদের হরেবল একটা সিচুয়েশন ক্রিয়েট করেছে এই যে মিডিয়া। তো এই মিডিয়াদের কি রেসপন্সিবল হওয়া উচিত ছিল না? এবং আমার তো এটা এখনো মনে হয় WHO অবশ্যই এখানে ইনভলভ আছে। এখানে কোনো বড় বড় কোম্পানি, ফ্যাক্টরি, ওষুধ কোম্পানি, তারা হয়তো ওষুধ বা ভ্যাকসিনের কোনো কিছু নিয়ে বসে আছে, যেটা সার্স মার্স এর ক্ষেত্রে হয়েছে। তারাও বিভিন্ন সময় বিভিন্ন দেশে সেটা বিক্রির জন্য সেগুলোকে মানে বহুজাতিক কোম্পানিগুলো, অ্যাকচুয়ালি the state is sovereign, but sometimes more sovereign is the corporate companies. Corporate companies are more sovereign than state, এবং more powerful than state, এবং তারাই পৃথিবীকে নিয়ন্ত্রণ করছে। পৃথিবীর দেখেন, 1 ভাগ লোকের হাতে পৃথিবীর সমস্ত সম্পদ রয়ে গেছে, বাকি লোকের হাতে কোনো সম্পদ নেই। এই যে ডিসক্রিমিনেশন, ওয়েলথের, টাকার, অর্থের ডিসক্রিমিনেশন, এটা কেন হবে? আপনাদের কনস্টিটিউশনে যেটা বলে, ইন্ডিয়া এবং বাংলাদেশের কনস্টিটিউশনে, যে সোশ্যালিস্ট সোসাইটি হবে, ইন এ ডেমোক্রেটিক সিস্টেম থাকবে, বাট সোশ্যালিস্ট সোসাইটি হবে, এভরিওয়ান শুড গেট ইকুয়াল পে, ইকুয়াল রাইটস, বাট সাফারিং, আপনাদের ওখানে অনেকে যে হরিজন সম্প্রদায় থেকে আনটাচেবিলিটি নাও ইজ দ্য কার্স, এন্ড ইন বাংলাদেশ অলসো। তো এই যে মানুষগুলো না খেয়ে আছে, যে লেবারার যারা আছে, তাদের জন্য তো চিন্তা করা উচিত। আমার মনে হয় বাংলাদেশ এই কারণেই লকডাউনকে খুব শক্তিশালী ভাবে এটা প্রয়োগ করেনি, লকডাউন এটা ঘোষণাও দেয়নি। বলেছে যে কিছু কিছু এলাকায় এখন কিছু এলাকায় লকডাউন করছে, হয়তো বা এই কারণে হতে পারে। তো আসলে আমরা আমাদেরকে আসলে সঠিক বুঝটা পাওয়াটা, আসলে জ্ঞানটাই দরকার। অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমরা আসলে জ্ঞানের জন্য তো রবীন্দ্রনাথ বলেছেন পরশ পাথর, তাই না? যে জ্ঞান হচ্ছে একটা পরশ পাথরের মতো। আসলে আমাদের সঠিক জ্ঞানটা দরকার, কিন্তু আমরা বিভিন্ন মিডিয়া সূত্রে যে সমস্ত জ্ঞান, ফেসবুকে যে সমস্ত কিছু পাচ্ছে, যত রকমের ট্রিটমেন্ট পেয়েছিলাম করোনা প্রোটেক্ট করার জন্য, অ্যাকচুয়ালি আসলে এগুলো সব ফেক ছিল, ভুল ছিল। আসলে জ্ঞানটা আমাদের দরকার। থ্যাংক ইউ।
The last question of that the person is asking, if we have time, like we will ask you this, is in the time of pandemic, how do you think human rights organizations are working, sir? Can you please elaborate on this point?
No, they are not working at all. They are not working at all in Bangladesh. in বাংলাদেশে কয়েকটি অর্গানাইজেশন কাজ করছে, এবং গভর্নমেন্টেরও কোনো রকমের, স্বাস্থ্য মন্ত্রণালয় বলেন বা অন্য বলেন, বিভিন্ন জায়গায় প্রণোদনা, বিভিন্ন কিছু দেওয়া হচ্ছে। এবং আমাদের দেশে, সারা বাংলাদেশে 23টা ইউনিটে আমাদের এই কোয়ান্টাম ফাউন্ডেশনের ফুনারাল টিম তারা কাজ করছে, এবং এটা আমরা নিজেরা টাকা দিয়ে, আমরা অর্থ দিয়ে, এবং ইভেন এখনো স্টিল আমরা গভর্নমেন্ট থেকে কোনো কিছুই পাইনি। এবং পিপি গুলো আমাদের তৈরি করা, এবং প্রতিটা লাশ দাফন করতে যেখানে লাগছে 12,000 থেকে 14,000 টাকার মতো প্রতিটা লাশ দাফন, কারণ পিপি গুলো সেখানে পুড়িয়ে ফেলতে হয়, সেই গ্রেভইয়ার্ডে পুড়িয়ে আমাদেরকে চলে আসতে হয়, এবং গামবুট থেকে শুরু করে 32টা আইটেম আমাদেরকে পড়তে হয়। হ্যাঁ, তো actually human rights organization, they are saying we are doing human rights, we're creating actually human rights কোথায়? আপনি বেদে যান, বেদে রয়েছে হিউম্যান রাইটস। আপনি শ্রীমদ্ ভগবত গীতাতে যান, সেখানে রয়েছে হিউম্যান রাইটস। দি ওয়ার্ল্ড ইজ এ ইউনিক ফ্যামিলি, এটাই তো শ্রীমদ্ ভগবত গীতা বলেছে, বসুধা বা কুসুম্বাকম। সর্বে ভাবে সর্বে সুখিনা সন্তি সর্বে নিরাময়া সর্বে ভদ্রাণি পশ্যন্তু। এই যে সকল মানুষকে আপনার 1948 সালের হিউম্যান রাইটস ডিক্লারেশনে, আমেরিকান হিউম্যান রাইটস, আপনার এই ইন্ডিয়ান সাবকন্টিনেন্টের হিউম্যান রাইটস লং লং হাজার হাজার বছরের ইতিহাস, হাজার হাজার বছরে। যখন ইউরোপ আমেরিকায় তারা কাপড় চুপড় পরতে জানতো না, বুনো ছাগলের মাংস খেত বা কাপড় পরে তারা ঘুরে বেড়াতো। তার চেয়ে অনেক আগের সিভিলাইজেশন হিউম্যান রাইটস আমাদের ইন্ডিয়ান সাবকন্টিনেন্টের। So we are proud for this thing. And you are saying that human rights organization, you know that the human rights organization, 30 articles, they are saying right to movement, right to health, right to this thing. But our subcontinent, আপনার গীতা বা বেদের বাক্যে যে সমস্তগুলো মোরাল দিকগুলো রয়েছে, আমাদের ইসলামেও বলেন যে মোরাল যে অ্যাটিটিউড দিকগুলো রয়েছে, যে একটা মৃতদেহের যে সম্মান পাওয়ার অধিকার, সে তো রেসপেক্টেড হবে, তাই না? যে তাকে লাস্টলি তাকে দাফন শেষ সৎকার না করা পর্যন্ত। বাট আর দি গেটিং দিস রেসপেক্ট? নো, নো ওয়ান ইজ কামিং। সো আমাদের স্কুল কলেজ ছোটবেলার লেখাপড়া যা কিছু করছি, সেই জায়গায় আমার এই মোরালিটির জায়গাটা নাই, বিকজ আমরা ডিটাচ হয়ে গিয়েছে। আমরা গীতার বাণী পড়ছি না, আমরা কোরআনের বাণী পড়ছি না, আমরা মোরাল এডুকেশন থেকে উই আর ভেরি much detached on those education. So the humanity is suffering.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this enlightening and a lot of information. We will now, when we are living in a country like India, the thing that comes to our mind is that there should be unity in diversity. And when that unity in diversity cannot be seen, or maybe when these new popular words like social distancing comes, it bothers us. It really bothers us so much. Keeping all these distances, differences, and distinctions in our mind, we will now move on to the next speaker. Our Shubhajit Noshkar sir, Assistant Professor, Jadavpur University. The topic of his discussion is social marginalization and caste gender dimension amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you please enlighten us. Thank you. So you have to unmute yourself first.
Yeah. So am I visible?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir, you're visible and audible both.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh, very good afternoon to all of you. Let me at the very outset thank Didhiti for sort of inviting me and the whole department of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya and the whole department for organizing such a timely discussion in a time which is very, very critical. So what I thought I'll be talking to all of you, or will sort of try to flag off, is the broader caste gender dimensions during the coronavirus pandemic, and of course that how at the base of it, at the base of the entire pandemic situation, there is this how social vulnerability is working. And with the social vulnerability, I'll try to sort of link that with that how social vulnerability has come up in a big way with the age old or the decades old or the centuries old the social marginalization process in India. And I'll stick to the case of India since that is what I have promised to. So what I'll do is that, since there are a lot of students, those are watching here, and I'll try to sort of recapture the whole situation right from March onwards, when this lockdown, the quote unquote lockdown started in a very sort of imprudent manner. So what really happened since then, and from then to today, that there have been the pandemic has been sort of has been a kind of cheer factor for a lot of us in the academics, the quote unquote privileged class or the privileged castes in the academics, that we could use these platforms like the webinars and stuff like that on the online teaching and stuff. But then what really happens that there are a series of things that we really ignored for long, and pandemic has sort of laid bare those. And what are those? I'll come to each of that and then we'll discuss in details, but let me sort of flag off the broader theoretical connotations that I thought that I would be touching upon. One is, of course, that this pandemic has created for long what we have done is that we have ignored that this entire society is based on the process of marginalization, that the social marginalization is at the bedrock of the Indian society, and pandemic kind of situations only amplify those those cleavages that already so pre-existing socio-political economic marginalities get sort of laid bare or they get re-amplified. It's already amplified, it gets re-amplified during the pandemic situation. The second point, that pandemic has created another very troubling thing, that is it has created a sense of otherness among the marginalized communities, among the women, among the migrant workers. Most of them, as the data shows, the census data and other studies, they show that mostly they come from the marginalized communities, the lower caste communities. And of course, another important thing that I thought I would be flagging off, that there is a larger politics which is panning out of due to the pandemic situation, and this is the right-wing politics. That how these right-wingers in India, which is the ruling party in the country, they are trying to sort of blend a post-truth sensibilities, as we call that. This is the post-truth world. There's the Trump in the United States, there's a Boris Johnson in the UK, there's a lot of these guys, Modi here in India. So how this there is this unscientific blending has been happening with the post-truth sensibilities. As the author of the post-truth, Lee McIntyre would say that these are the guys, the post-truth leaders. They have discovered a great thing, that they know that how to sort of tell people that things are quite right, we are working on it, but yet they're hiding the real miseries those are playing out due to the pandemic situation. So here is a politics of unreason that is there, and that politics is being sort of mainstream continuously during the pandemic. So I'll come back to each of that how politics of unreason is really playing out. But moreover, I would like to sort of deconstruct this entire model, that this huge talk of social distancing, that how this entire model of social distancing itself is a very problematic symptom, especially in the time of pandemic, because as you know that the distance used to be a state of mind in India, because this is a hierarchical caste-based Hindu society, and largely. But the epithet of the social, in the social distancing, the word social, this epithet of social has added to a physical process of socio-cultural disassociations, where there are, people, those would be, rejecting, those would be sort of saying that I can't eat from a Dalit person who is cooking food in the quarantine centers. That is happening in Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and in other areas. But what I would do now is that as the broader title of the webinar, it actually tries to look at how the post-lockdown strategy is going to look like. So in March 31, I wrote an article for Outlook, and for the first time, I was one of the few who sort of suggested that we need a social safeguarding model to sort of deal with it. And this was the time when you would remember that, the Trump came, the pandemic situation already was grave. The government of Kerala already put in place lot of measures, but the Modi government, as usual, the politics first, and so Modi, the president of the United States, landed in his home state, and then sort of once he went back, and then there was this Madhya Pradesh politics was also playing out, and all of these once ended, and the Modi government went into a lockdown mode. So here is this there's a fine blending of politics with the pandemic. So here is what I call, this is a politics of pandemic that has been sort of played by the Modi government. But what really I have suggested is that, since I had seen that a lot of these migrant workers, those found themselves, because this was only 3 hours, 4 hours gap with which the 56-inch muscle man, he sort of had announced that we are going for a 21 days national lockdown. And all of a sudden, these migrant workers, they found themselves jobless overnight, and then they found themselves stranded across the metro cities of the country, in Bangalore, in Chennai, in Hyderabad, in Delhi, in other parts of the country. So they got panicked, and they thought that this is kind of a situation where, for us, there's this talk that has been going in among the migrant workers. Those started working on the road, with whatever baggage that they had, the luggage. They started working from Hyderabad, from Visakhapatnam, from Delhi to UP, and these are the migrant workers mostly of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Odisha, Bengal. So what really happened? They started saying that virus se nahi marenge, bhook se marenge. So what really happened is that this is the hunger, that may make us die on the road. And this is what exactly happened. You would see that a lot of these migrant workers, they started working on the road towards their hometown, and they started dying out of hunger. And those miserable, the disturbing visuals on the news channels and other platforms. But what I thought of discussing, or sort of thought of flagging here, is that this vulnerability that these migrant workers are facing, the people on the lower strata of the caste society is facing, or for example women are facing, because they are also considered, because as Toni Morrison says that the blacks never grow in the eyes of whites. Similarly, as Professor Gopal Guru and others would say that Dalits never grow in the eyes of the upper caste, and women never grow in the eyes of the society largely, or in the eyes of men. So this is the kind of syndrome that is already there. Now the bigger point that I tried to sort of touch upon and sort of link the entire discussion is that how the social marginalization, the social marginalities have for centuries in India created social vulnerabilities. So social vulnerabilities that you see today among the migrant workers, that all of us are very disturbed. Quote unquote disturbed, because privileged classes, those are the hoarding classes. We have bought a lot of our essential commodities, but we saw ourselves that we are really, really disturbed by the conditions of the migrant workers. How I really doubt that how far we are disturbed. But the point is that I'm trying to say here that the marginalization, how marginalization is happening in India. How has it happened? How socially or culturally or politically or economically, these marginalizations have happened, and this has only got laid bare, got widened during a pandemic situation like this. Now, let me sort of address the caste point. You would know that there's this a magnificent research done by Dr. Amit Thorat, with NCAER and University of Maryland. They asked two specific questions to the respondents: that does anyone in your family practice untouchability? Or in case the answer was no, they asked a second question: would it be okay for a scheduled caste person to enter your kitchen or use your utensils? So what was the answer? Answer is very startling. The survey found the 27% respondents across the country agreed that they did practice untouchability, and it was most prevalent among the Brahmin respondents, and it is the 52% among the Brahmin respondent, when 24% of the non-Brahmin other higher caste respondents sort of admitted to it, that they practice untouchability. They wouldn't like the Dalits to enter their kitchen. There are lots of articles written by scholars in EPW and other journals. But then the point is that this is a hierarchical society based on caste. Here you have a fourfold Varna system where you have created that the Brahmins at the top, Kshatriyas come second, Vaishyas comes third, and the Sudras come last. And this is the community, the Sudras, that I would like to sort of go back and forth. What really happens that since this is largely the caste domination or the caste hegemony, remains quite intact, and this is what is visible across the board. What happens that this is the country which, in a very subtle way or in very radical ways, in the rural areas, they practice purity and pollution games, or the practice untouchability on the purity and pollution structures. And in the urban areas, in the university spaces, you would know that how it's not really untouchability, it's not really physical distancing, it's not really a social distancing, but the subtle games of sort of demoralizing the Dalit identities, or that marginalizing the Dalit identity in the interviews and other places, be it JNU, JU, Hyderabad Central Universities, everywhere. This is on. During the interviews, there's a lot of fights, going on, a lot of protests go on, regarding the way marking has been happening. So the point that I'm trying to come in, is that this entire marginalization process, this marginalization process is a major social determinant in the health sector as well. So, and that got amplified during a pandemic situation like this. So now, this pandemic is largely being backed initially by the World Health Organization and now by the various governments. But today, World Health Organizations and other governments, they have really rejected the idea, calling it social distancing, and they have started calling it a physical distancing. But then once it came into our mind that social distancing needs to be imposed, why that has to come in mind initially? The point is the social distancing is nothing but a hegemonic caste scheme in India. And and the politicians and the ruling class or the privileged caste and class communities, they can't really think beyond the this social distancing model, which is a caste scheme, as I call it. So the physical distancing, as I said in the initial few lines, that social distancing was already in our mind. This social distancing model has led where, sort of implemented a physical distancing. Physical distancing is there through the practicing of untouchability. Now, what the social marginalization does in a grave situation like this is that it creates health inequalities, right? So the way, various kind of communities are responding to the COVID-19 is not same, I have got a COVID-19, a ruling member or a person who is in the upper strata, who is well off. Dr. Ajay was giving example of AAP member or Boris Johnson and others. So these are like the privileged people. For them it's like this man, the AAP health minister, got the plasma therapy within few hours. But can you really, ask the common people that will they get? They are not, the situation in Kolkata. I have been dealing with few cases where, some of my far off relatives, they got tested positive. They are very poor people, and they are not getting beds, and they are not also rich to afford in the private healthcare system, which is very, very expensive, like Medica, Fortis, Apollo, and other places. And in the government facilities, the government's responses are really mixed. People are lying outside, and that how dead bodies were found, quote unquote. I'm not trying to take a risk since Disaster Management Act is imposed. Amit Sak will come and hunt me. But the point I'm trying to make here is this, that the health inequalities are largely created by the prehistorical socio-political, cultural, and economic marginalities. So you can't really club the privileged and the underprivileged. So the privileged have always got a differential or the preferential treatment, as I call it, and that got amplified during this pandemic situation. I would like to sort of put across a case that very recently I have dealt with. One of our students in Jadavpur University, a girl student, she was a victim of domestic violence. And since this is in the newspaper, I don't think that I can, I can't hold that back. So what really happened when I came to know about the situation, that this girl is being tortured by her father and elder brother at her home, and the girl came out of house and wanted to get shelter in some of the paying guests, or in the friends. They are fighting COVID-19 pandemic. So the social solidarities, Derridian social solidarities, the Camus's ideas, everything has got sort of segregated. Now the point is that I had to talk to the vice chancellor, and I asked him that, sir, what do you expect a student who is an official student, a registered student of the university? Jadavpur University has a lot of human resources. We have university guest houses. We have hostels. Why can't we afford to, sort of make us stay comfortable in these places? But later on, I got to know in the hostel, some of these students, they are not ready to sort of take her in. But then we sort of arranged later on something for the other, thanks to the vice chancellor and the other people in the administration. So we worked that out. But the point that I'm trying to say, that here is another marginal situation where you see a young girl or a young woman who is facing this kind of crisis, who is not really a privileged. You can't call a undergraduate student as a privileged, and she is literally not coming from a privileged background. So this is what is the condition. So I'm trying to sort of make a point here that this entire health, there is a health inequality already that is being existing, because there is social marginalization. Now, as you know, that marginalization shows health risk resulting from what? Nothing but the discrimination. So discrimination has been the bedrock, as a lot of people say that constitution is the bedrock of Indian democracy. It might be, but then how far constitution is being implemented, that's $1 million question. But since it's a COVID-19 discussion, let me focus on that. But that the entire health inequalities are created on the social marginalization, and the social marginalization is created by the discriminations on various grounds, by the upper caste and the upper class, towards the lower caste. So there's this there's a lot of talk that we have arrived in an era which is a modern era, and now it's a postmodern era. But there might be modernity, there might be urbanization, but these are largely myths. I'll come back to that, how the modernization and urbanization is a myth in the urban and the rural areas. But then the discrimination and the environmental disasters, as you know, that we have very recently gone through a big environmental risk, which is the cyclone Amphan. But then what really happened is that the severe illness or the trauma or the restricted access of healthcare system, these are not really a normal kind of thing for every caste community or the every class community. So what I'm trying to say, that there is a preferential treatment, there is a different kind of mental health. I'm trying to, again, I'm gathering courage and trying to say that mental health crisis might be there for all of us. There's the Bollywood star who has committed or suicide or things like that. It's under investigation. But the point I'm trying to say is that the mental health crisis is not only that because there's a lot of talk in the social media that mental health is a very big pandemic. But then what about the severe marginal conditions in which they are living? For example, the cyclone Amphan, through which we have just got somehow recovered, there are a lot of students of Jadavpur University, those I know, staying in Sundarbans area. They could not recover yet. They have lost their house. Their houses are being washed out, and this is sort of going on, right? Now, let me now bring in a very important concept, to substantiate my point that as French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu would argue that there is this habitus. Habitus is being created. How the habitus is being created? For the students, let me explain it. That habitus is very important, the Bourdieuan concept, because it's important to understand, because habitus is constructed through social and cultural capital, right? And the underprivileged misfortune produced and reproduced through social sufferings and cultural alienation. So it is from this prism we need to interrogate the evolving pandemic situation also, right? Because the kind of habitus that you see in the urban areas, you will see that there is this upper caste ghettos, there is alienated lower caste households, or on the basis of religion, the Muslim household ghettos. So what is really happening is this, that these socio-cultural political alienations gets reproduced and create many more habitus. And on the other hand, the underprivileged gets reproduced. The underprivileged of the underprivileged, the misfortune of the underprivileged communities, those actually get discriminated on various grounds, the caste or the class based. Now their underprivileged gets discriminated, so gets reproduced, and that's how there is this privilege keeps on going upward, and underprivileged communities, they keep on going downward. And what happens during this health situation or during this pandemic situation, that this marginalization process, it creates a context for vulnerability and thereby influencing health. Now, so this is broadly how the social marginalization creates social vulnerability, on the basis of untouchable practices, on the basis of the caste-based segregations in the households and others. Now let me come back to my article that I wrote for Outlook, where I had till then suggested that this lockdown can create a kind of othering, a kind of the ethical or the moral concerns broadly, and that is why we need a social safeguarding. And towards the end, I will be talking about that why it would be immoral to talk of exit strategy for the from this coronavirus pandemic situation, because we are not really morally fit society, or the moral conscience is not really fit to talk about this exit strategy, because there are many other pandemic that is there, like social marginalization, discrimination, and others. I'll come back to that briefly. But before that, what are the concerns that I sort of put across in that article that I wrote as early as on the March 31st in 2020? That why Indian government, or the governments of the state governments and the central government, they need to aggressively pursue social safeguarding model for various for the migrant workers and for the people those are living on the margin. As you know that as I have already briefly said, that this the socio-economic vulnerabilities of the marginalized are spiraling out of control day by day, and this has happened, as I say, and I hold the governments responsible, especially the central government, because it is because of their imprudent social distancing measures, right? And the way a certain announcement came as a shock, because it sent shockwaves to the migrant workers and to the people on the margin. The 21 days, the first lockdown, right? Now all of us have seen that how there is this exodus of the migrant workers, have happened so far. And in Delhi, there's this at the bus stand in the midnight, how people have swarmed into that bus stand to board the buses, by sort of sidelining the quote unquote physical distancing or the social distancing and stuff. But we can't really hold those migrant workers responsible, because you have not really addressed their problems so far, from the pre-colonial period to the post-colonial period, or from the pre-independence to the post-independence. It's not that today pandemic has come and this is what happened. This is the Delhi Roj Namcha. This is the Delhi, this is how they travel in the buses. This is how they travel, because they are the people, those are on the margins, literally. Now, with there's another thing that has aggravated this whole pandemic situation. As you know, that the post-1990 has embraced a LPG model, the liberalization, privatization, and globalization model. With these, what really happened that it actually started focusing on, because a lot of FDI came in, the foreign direct investments. But then what really happened is that it created a lot of proletariat classes. Also, it created a lot of marginalized, castes in the metro cities, because in the post-1990s, the focus started, going to the urban sectors, not to the rural areas. And you would remember the former president of India, Kalam, said that you need to really provide urban, this famous Pura concept, PURA, providing urban amenities to the rural areas. That has never happened. Now, the point is that since we started building the metro cities like Bangalore, like high-tech city in Hyderabad, and in Kolkata's Newtown, Rajarhat Township, and other places. So what really happened is that this neoliberal policies of the post-1990 has created a huge informal sector workforce. Those have been working at the real estate. Those are working in the other informal sectors, as the drivers of the babus, the drivers in various sectors, and in the construction sector largely, right? Because that's when we started building a lot of apartments, a lot of housing, a lot of township, but with this, you will have that there is a huge proliferation of the of a informal sector upper class jobs like receptionist, like HR professionals and others. What really has happened is that the government sector has started shrinking in the post 1990, and there has been a proliferation of a salaried class in the informal sector. And we should not forget that these are the people, those are HR professionals and other receptionists and other people in the private sector. They are also on the margin. They are also, this entire lockdown, and this is unlock probably 2.0 or maybe 1.0, and in the middle of 1.0 and 2.0. So this entire lockdown has sent shockwaves to them, and probably there are, the government, the white collar job holders, they are probably the privileged class and caste. So for them, this might not matter much. So we are showing some kind of hollowed solidarities, but they are this informal sector workforce. They are substantively, facing some kind of social vulnerability with the informal sector workforce, like the migrant workers, the grocery shop, the small grocery shop owners, the telewala, as we call in Delhi terms, or in the Hindi way, and the telawala and others. So they have, their jobs got sort of largely shrunk. Now, you would remember that, there was a lot of talk that this post-1990 LPG, the embracing of the liberalization, privatization, and globalization will bring better days, and will eventually get us rid of the bad days the people on the margin will get more money in their hands and stuff like that. Those of you have read Karl Popper's book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, that's published in 1945. You would remember that Karl Popper said that the entire spirit of reason, reform, criticism, and the other ideals of the open society, the quote-unquote open society that he talks about, it actually dies a natural death because of the capitalist system. So the coronavirus pandemic has revealed another important aspect, that is the capitalist delusions, right? So it really, what this capitalist delusion has done to us, it really pushed human lives into the disposable body bags. And that's how you would be seeing, on the roads, some disturbing pictures came from Gujarat and in some of the government hospitals and some other places. Now, there is another important concern that needs to be talked about, and hardly talked about actually. That is the ethical concerns. You would know that to impose the social distancing model, the quote-unquote social distancing, I'm refraining myself from using the word social distancing. So this entire physical or the social physical distancing, to impose that in toto as the government has directed, you would see that there has been beating has gone on, and people are being bitten. Who are these people? The migrant workers, to put them in line, or to make them follow the MHA directives, the Ministry for Home Affairs directives. So what really has happened that in the process of implementing this dictums of the central government or the MHA advisories, people, the police, segments of the institutions, the government institutions, of course, they started unethical. There is building. See that a lot of these wallas, their tellers are being, the vegetables are being thrown out. And very recently, two grocery shop owners in Tamil Nadu, Tuticorin, they are being beaten to death. What they have done? Because they have they kept their shop open for 15 minutes more than the scheduled time. And what was the punishment? So the human beings are being made as the disposable bags. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so the point that I'm trying to sort of again bring in is this, that these ethical concerns, those are actually panning out, are not being really addressed. So on the one hand, you would see that the government is rerunning Ramayana, for the privileged class, and you would see that MHRD, the former MHRD minister Prakash Javadekar is watching, having a cup of tea and watching Ramayana and taking pride, and later on deleting the tweet. But then, this rerunning of Ramayana is something that actually makes that tells us volumes about the concerns that these institutional segments are having for these migrant workers, or for the marginalized communities. Those actually are getting pushed day by day in this pandemic situation. So this is actually reproducing, or sort of giving more spaces to the privilege. That is what the rerunning of Ramayana means. Why you could not arrange the buses or the trains or the free of cost trains for the migrant workers, but you are rerunning the Ramayana. So do we really need that? I remember a great book that has been written by Brookings economist Richard Ripps, and a very famous book called Dream Hoarders. And this is the privileged class are really the cause, are really the dream hoarders. The book is Dream Hoarders: How the American Upper Middle Class is Leaving Everyone Else in the Dust, and Why That is the Problem and What to Do About It. He actually said a very important, stated an important concern, And he says that members of the upper middle class, that is in the American context, in India is the members of the upper caste communities, mostly those are the privileged, and you would know that, and this is not in the air, this is the Arjun Sengupta committee report, who says that 80% of the Indian, the poor of the Indian society are from the scheduled caste communities, or the Dalit communities, or the lower caste communities. So now the point that Richard Reeves, the broking economist Richard Reeves, says that the members of the upper middle class are doing very well and should be asked to contribute a greater share to the common good. This requires them first to look in the mirror and see that they are not the victims of inequality, but the victors, right? So there is this lot of talk that, a lot of NGOs are working, going and distributing relief and stuff like that. But then, first you need to really interrogate your privilege. You come from the privileged community. And you have seen very recently the death of George Floyd, and there's this sudden talk about, so in the middle of pandemic, the racial inequality, caste inequality, caste-based discrimination, race-based discrimination, that is not getting stopped. So what is the bigger pandemic? The bigger pandemic is this racial inequalities, to my mind. The bigger pandemic. So you have seen that here is a black man who is being sort of met, whose breathing is being choked, and he is being made to die on the road in the broad daylight, which is what happened in Tamil Nadu in Tuticorin. The two guys, they are being killed, or rather they are being murdered by, this is the institutional police brutality. And now what comes, the next important thing is that these are the kind of pandemics that needs to be addressed. And to address that, as Richard Reeves, the Brookings economist, says, we need to first look at ourselves, look into the mirror and say that we are not the victims of the inequality, we are the victors. These entire socio-economic political inequalities that we talk about, these are actually privileging us. These inequalities are for the underprivileged. He goes further and says a very important thing. He says, in the case of America, and so is broadly true in the case of India, he identifies income and the wealth as a crucial dimension, which virtually segregating top 20% with the rest 80%, which is what the condition. You would see that in Mumbai, there is this billion dollar Antilla, Mukesh Ambani's residence, and in front of the Antilla, you have a slum, which is world's largest slum, probably, the Mumbai slum. And you don't really, look at the conditions, that how, the slum dwellers are working or, living over there, that whether do you really imagine that social distancing can be followed in these shanty houses? It cannot be. This entire social distancing is a privileged idea. For the poor, for the migrant workers, for the slum dwellers, for the sanitation workers and others, they can't afford to live like that. There are 7 to 8 family members or 10 family members. They have to live in a single room. So this is broadly the thing. The point is that the privileged class, or the privileged rulers, or the people in the powers of corridor, they do not really count the ethical concerns or the moral concerns as something of a matter during the pandemic situation, which is aggravating the situation. The successful models in the world like New Zealand or Taiwan, they have come out. They have come out very easily because their society is much more equal. They are, human. They perform, handsomely in the Human Development Index. But look at ours. Look at the entire Indian subcontinent. Now, so these ethical concerns needs to be addressed, and until and unless we are really addressing these ethical concerns, this entire otherness or the othering of this huge millions and millions of marginalized community people, or the migrant workers, small grocery shop owners, they will remain otherized. Now, let me sort of now bring in the women. Again, I wrote an article, in the early days in April in Outlook, that how this entire health system is gendered. The gendered healthcare system amidst the coronavirus pandemic. So this entire, with the class, with the caste, third bigger elephant in the room is the gender. the women are again, because as I said, Toni Morrison's prophetic words, the blacks never grow in the eyes of whites. Similarly, women never grow in the eyes of the society largely, right? So what really happens that, distance, as I have said, that, maintaining distance is a historically entrenched in various forms of normative isolations, by the upper caste groups in the Hindu social order. It goes back to the centuries old untouchable practices against the lower caste communities of the Indian subcontinent. Also, there's something important here. Also, the sexual agency of the Hindu women has had been historically suppressed. You read any, you take up any of the, Vedic text or the Manusmriti, women are being relegated to the margin. Women's sexual agency has been sort of, suppressed largely. Look at Manu. Manu said that women should never think, at par with the men, and some other, nonsensical stuff. And Manu, of course, that the casteist epitome, and this is a failure of this, quote unquote rational society, or the modernity, the society which is building blocks on the modernity or the urbanity. They could not remove the statue from the premises of the Rajasthan High Court. But let me sort of now say this: there is this, archaic trajectories that actually got manifold during this pandemic situation, and this has happened, because there is this prehistoric, as I say, those of you have read Garda Lerner's book, the Creation of Patriarchy. You would know that, this entire patriarchy is sanctioned by the religion. You go to the Islam, you read Quran, you read Surah Al-Baqarah 2:222, 2:3. If you are menstruating, you are not allowed to enter into the mosque. If the women are being sort of thought of as the or the ground for the men, and so is the case with the Manusmriti, right? And the women's sexual agency has never been sort of allowed to perform in the Indian society. So now that has had an effect on the health system. That has created havoc in the health system. So that's how the health system. So health system is an island. It's not somewhere in the Eiffel Tower. It's very much there. So health system is largely gendered, and let me sort of use some data that how the entire gendered healthcare system is creating otherness among the women also. Now, so most of our discussions today, that how we need to really cheer for the health workforce, thali bajao, and I don't really remember, ghanti bajao, and stuff like that. But do you really pay handsomely to the healthcare workers? And remember, these healthcare workers, the dominant section of these healthcare workers are the nurses. They are the frontline workers. They are the frontline warriors. And in some states, you would see everyday news are coming, 2 months, 3 months salaries are not being paid. They are working in unhygienic situations, and they are not being addressed. So this is how the post-truth sensibilities are being sort of mainstream. That you do not really go by the kind of cheer. So you be the cheerleader, and your rationalities be transformed into the privileged sensibility of the rulers. So now let me sort of cite a very important data that World Health Organization published in its working paper in 2019, where it says that gender equity in the health workforce, overall, and there is a average gender pay gap of 28% exists in the health workforce. And once occupation and working hours are accounted for, the gender pay gap is 11%. So this is between the men and women, right? The male nursing staff or the male workers and the female workers, there is a 28% gap in the pay. So, but on the other hand, there's this study that is being done by the World Health Organization that has revealed that the 70% of the workers in the health sector are women. So, but what you have done to them, right? There is this pay disparity, there is this payment gaps, there's the salary gaps. You have not really addressed. and you want us to salute, you want us to, thali bajana or ghanti bajana and stuff like that, and lighting lamps and stuff like that. But you are not addressing the stark disparities the nurses, female childcare workers, or the aged care workers, or the cleaning staff work on the front line are going through. Now, another important, aspect that needs to be also talked about is that there is this biological differences are being mainstream, that women cannot be considered at par with the men because biologically women are being weak. Women are weak. So these very concept, this very mindset, this very notion actually, amplify, the myriad forms of gendered responses during the situations like this, during pandemic. So this in fact the arrangements of the counter measures to lethal coronavirus disease are considered largely as masculine. You look at the organizational task forces and other patterns, the gender roles are very visible. You have all the men, those are calling shots. So now it is in this context the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on women's healthcare are extremely significant. Now let me tell you that what is happening, since there's this Thomson Reuters survey that has been done very recently, and where there is something which should worry us. And in 2018 Thomson Reuters Foundation survey, India has been named, and not much ago, it's 2018 only, India has been named as world's most dangerous country for women due to high risk of sexual violence, right? So also experts says that India also moving to the top of poll, so not enough was being done to tackle the dangers women faced. So on the other hand, you will see during this pandemic situation, there are many women, those are housewives, those are also working women, they have to stay back, they have to stay women, and they have to live with this, with the partners, those are otherwise abusive. So they are living with the violence, intimate partner violence, partners violence as we call it, or the boyfriends, or the other male workers in the house. So this is a kind of and of course their sexual health, because there is this there's this talk of that there might be a baby boom. So they are not being provided, the women are not being provided in the lockdown with the proper reproductive measures, or the reproductive health measures, but they have to live by it because it's a male dominated society. Your sexual agency is not really your agency, it's being held by the male, and that is how the religions have sanctioned. Now the point that I'm trying to say is that the situation has aggravated in such a situation that the National Commission for Women, they have to sort of they have received several calls of domestic violence across the country. The situation escalated to such an extent that the NCW, the National Commission for Women, had to launch a WhatsApp number besides online complaints, as the lockdown has exposed women to the potential perpetrators and abusive intimate partners. The households provide an enabling environment because the households are being largely, segregated, because there are some kind of works in the household, those are being gendered. For example, cooking is being thought as a women's job. Sort of filling the water bottle is broadly being thought as a job for women. So there is this gendered society in which we are already living in, and now since women are living within the households due to the lockdown, situation has really aggravated. It's really a win-win situation for the misogynist, abusive men, or the patriarchal men, but women are being marginalized here. Now the point is that what we need to do in this kind of situation, that we need to really take some kind of policy decisions where which is where there is gender based representations, where there is there is gender based sensitivities at play before sort of working on that. Now the very last few points that I would like to sort of talk of is that that what is the exit strategy? What will happen after this? We have already gone into lockdowns in several phases. We are going through several phases of unlocks. And what is then now the sort of exit strategies? Before I go back to that, let me sort of address to the situation in Kolkata and West Bengal. That what is the situation in Kolkata and West Bengal, right? And there's a lot of pride that is being taken on the Bengali society, that it's really a modern society and stuff like that. But then there is this a brilliant paper, working paper, which has been written by a group of IIM Bangalore doctoral scholars, Naveen Bharti, Deepak Malgan, and Abdul and Andalib Rahman. They wrote this paper in 2018, and this is a magnificent piece of work, and I would really request all of you to read that work. That's freely available. And this is titled as Isolated by Caste: Neighborhood Scale Residential Segregation in Indian Metros, that is in the metro cities. And in the Kolkata, and there is a segment for Kolkata there, that there's a lot of talk about this is a Rabindric society, this is a modern society, this is a society where we live together, where we cheer together. But then not a single lower caste are to be found in the 60% of these Kolkata metro neighborhoods. So this is how caste also divides Indian cities. So here is this segregated formulas, and these are really hardcore hard facts. So is the case in the case of Rajkot, for example, the city in Gujarat. So now this entire socio-cultural political public sphere is segregated by this caste mindset, where you on the one hand you proclaim that there are a lot of myths that it's a urban society, it's a modern society. But then with the advent of modernity and the urbanization, the caste has not really withered away. Caste is very much at the play, and which is why there is the segregated livelihoods. And those of you who have been follow brilliant works by Professor Sukhdev Thorad, you would know that 35% to 45% migrant workers come from the SC, ST, OBC communities, and from the OBC Muslim communities, and they are on the margin. So now since they were isolated in the rural spaces, Gandhi's quote unquote Ram Rajyas, since they were since their caste was on the lower status, so they had to sort of leave those villages, and for the livelihood they had to shift to the urban spaces or the metro cities. But what happened? What metro cities have given to these migrant workers, or these Dalit workers? They are now left with nothing. They are having the hunger deaths. Now this lot of talk about modernity and urbanization has withered away everything and anything is really a myth, and we need to really shatter that myth, and need to really, so this entire job market, be it in the rural sector, be it in the urban sector, that they do not work like that. The caste class identities matter. So now the point is that this pioneering study that has been done, and I'm just concluding here in 5 minutes, this pioneering study that has been done by the IIM scholars, they have said that the entire urban sociological life is not really as symptomatic of the caste. So the caste very much works over there. So this othering, of the caste, lower caste communities or the lower class communities in the rural areas, in the urban spaces, gets amplified by these pandemic measures, because most of the pandemic measures are not being taken by keeping in mind the ethical concerns, right? Now the last few points that to conclude and talk about the exit strategy. So as the title of the webinar wants to seek a likely post-lockdown situation. So what is the broadly, the broader exit strategy? There's no doubt that this is the pandemic situation, because the way this virus, because this is an infection virus, this is not a normal virus that it goes like that. So it actually travels, right? So since it travels, so it really is a global pandemic situation, probably after Ebola and some sort. But do we, a society like India, can we really, go for a strategizing an exit strategy without exiting from other epidemics? And what are those epidemics that I have talked for in the last 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes? So this is a society where you have the hegemonic caste habitus, where there is segregation in the name of caste, where is segregation in the name of proletariat and upper class communities. So can we really get rid of that? As I have already said, that New Zealand, which is a very successful model, it has become coronavirus free. And Taiwan, look at their human development index, look at their society, right? So here, there's this so-called liberal democracy, the epitome of the liberal democracy, United States. Even amid the pandemic, you have seen that how a black person had to die and is being murdered by a white police officer. And so is the case here. The other day, a former ex-army man, Arjun Mishra, he has raped a lower caste girl, Jyoti Paswan, and there is no in the pandemic situation, this all goes on in the Tuticorin, the way institutional police brutality and eventual murder. And in other places of UP and Madhya Pradesh, where in the quarantine centers, the upper caste quarantined, COVID-19 patients, they are saying that they are not, they cannot eat food. They will not eat food cooked by the Dalit community people. So this is the situation. So can we really think of it? I'm trying to problematize and trying to sort of live with you certain questions, that can we really not think of the epidemic, the pre-existing epidemic, which will create a much smoother space or much smoother pace to exit from a pandemic situation like COVID-19, right? So now the point is that this, for example, there is a lot of talk about we need to build herd community. To build herd community, you need to build immunity system. But how can you expect and to build a proper immunity system? You need to also, have proper protein intakes, proper nutrition intakes, and there are people on the ground. Those are coming from the marginalized communities, and do you really think that they can afford? They are today living on the ration system that is being given by the government, and can you really imagine that they will be, they are really they will be able to build a herd community? It is the privileged caste and class like us, the salaried class, or the landowning classes, we can really think of building herd community. So you have never built herd community, and which is why we have never built an equal society. And it's largely an unequal society, and which is why you perform so miserably in the Human Development Index. And you have seen that how we are every year we are slipping in that ladder and performing much worsely, performing so worsely than the some of the the countries of the African continent, right? So think about it, that do we really address this this widespread pre-existing pandemic that exists on the basis of caste, which segregates people in the name of physical, in the name of purity and pollution, or the untouchable practices. So on the other hand, for the students, since and this is my own hunch, that this post-pandemic situation may make us depend more on, even as World Health Organization says, that we are going to live in a world which is not going to be same as we lived in. And in this kind of situation, we are going to sort of be independent, be dependent more on the virtual platforms. But what will happen to the people? Those cannot afford these virtual platforms. You would remember there's this Kerala Dalit girl who has committed suicide because she could not afford a gadget, right? Technological high-end gadget to participate in the online classes and other stuff. And this is what a father has committed suicide because he could not provide a gadget to his daughter very recently. And there is this news. And for example, Jadavpur University, we are one of those rare, probably there are many, but we have not gone into these online virtual classes, keeping in mind there are many students come from the marginalized backgrounds. They can really not afford. Those are, for example, in Sundarbans, their houses are being worst because of cyclone Amphan. Can they afford? I'm giving a lecture in an air-conditioned room and with few laptops or the gadgets or the Wi-Fi. Can they really afford that? They do not have electricity yet. I was talking to a student yesterday, and he says that, sir, electricity is not yet being repaired. Even though electricity is the kind of electricity that reaches Sundarban is not enough. All of you know that. Those of you are having a knowledge about the condition with which Sundarbans, the people in Sundarbans are living in. Now, the point that I'm trying to say, that there's this digital divide that is being created, that will create. So when we talk about exit strategy, you need to address this. You need to exit from these endemics, and then you can really think of a exit strategy from from this situation. And I end here, and I once again thank Diditi for inviting, and now I'm open to discussion and questions.
Thank you very much, sir. It has been really, really very much informative, and we have a bunch of questions from the chat box. But before that, we would like to ask our resource persons and all the speakers here if they have any questions, because I have one already. Anyone who would like to ask, sir? Okay. So I just wanted to ask you one thing. So do you think that in the current situation, is it being pointed that a particular community as the carrier of this disease? Do you think there is also a link with this, with the Spanish flu, where the Hebrew community was also pointed out like this? Just if you can comment a little bit on this.
Okay, so I understand what you were indicating, but you could really take the name, this entire. So I actually did not take that particular name because the Tablighi Jamaat, the way they were being demeaned, the Muslims for. But this is what the society, as I said, that there is this communal epidemic. So, that is again something that needs to be dealt with. Until and unless we talk about, so I really am not bothered about the short-term strategies that, so this communal virus, just like the caste virus, that is at the base of it. So, blaming a particular community, or this is not new, telling, for example, the Northeasterners, you would remember the students from the Northeast, how they are being called as quote unquote chinky, and they are the carriers of the virus on the roads in Delhi, in Hyderabad, and I get regular information from some of my friends in the Northeast, and that how they are being, taunted with their skin and stuff like that, that they look like Chinese, and they are the ones, those are brought in as if from Wuhan, so there is this lot of China bashing also goes on, that this is all came from China, but of course this started in Wuhan, but then how New Zealand, for example, or the Taiwan got rid of it. So this is your failure. You could not create a robust healthcare system. the robust society, which is equal society. Why you have to shift your blame and change your goalposts every time you face a crisis situation? So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, Pallavi Dash, she has a question. She asks, Sir, we have always had social hierarchy and their violent expressions. How do we put the blame on a disease? Isn't it just another excuse to distance ourselves from the other?
Well, see, that is why I have really tried to bring in a lot of articles and literature, so that what really happens, since we are living in a postmodern society, or a modern society as we call it, or a post-truth society. The entire social media, posts and stuff like that shape our ideologies or the thinking, rather than the hard truths. So why this, why we should not, for example, connect hierarchy, social hierarchy during the pandemic? I have already told you that a Dalit woman is being raped day before yesterday by a upper caste man, and there is not much hue and cry. You go and there is viral justice for Jyoti Paswan, right? So why this is happening in the pandemic? You look at what happened to George Floyd. So nothing really stops caste hierarchies, even if it's a global pandemic. So these caste-based, communal-based operators, they are always at play. You just need to keep your own mind open and look around and see that what is happening on the ground. You should not be selective, because when you ignore that, when you sort of overlook that, you are actually not really interrogating your privileged location, which you need to. Right? So if social hierarchy did not exist, for example, I have given you an example from Uttar Pradesh. In a quarantine center, a Dalit Sarpanch, in Bengal we call Pradhan, Panchayat Pradhan, she was cooking food for the quarantine. I don't know whether a Brahmin person would be cooking food for the quarantine center or not. That will never happen. But a Dalit Sarpanch is so humble that she was cooking food for the quarantine center patients. And this quarantine center patients, they had the audacity to say that we will not have food that is being cooked by a Dalit Sarpanch. You go, that is being covered. You just search in the Google. It's there. It's being reported by the Telegraph, by Indian Express, by every major newspapers. It happened in Uttar Pradesh. So that remains. So is it that I'm talking in the something which is not happening? Here is hard facts, which is being substantiating the claims.
So Mondrita Sil, she has asked that how do you think media, especially social media, could have played an active role in recreating, or rather creating, awareness about the re-marginalization of women in society?
Social media, what is the question? Can you just tell me?
How do you think the social media could have played an active role in creating awareness about the re-marginalization of women in society?
Well, that's a good question, but it's other way around. It is probably, to me, it's the social media which played a very active role, not the mainstream media. Let me put it that way. Okay. I see especially lots and lots of posts, those talk about domestic violence, and how women are victims of intimate partners' violence, and husbands. And I see very less reporting in the mainstream media on this. So telling social media is that platform you need to really, of course, there are a lot of people, just things like, a lot of rubbish memes are being shared, which is again, but remember, there are memes, there are some videos, there are some posts, those are really representative of the hard facts. And mainstream media, since they have lots of obligations, because they have funding from the corporate sector, they balance ideologies of the political parties, so they can really not report in such vehement way, the way we can write, for example, on Facebook, or we can tweet, or we can we can post on Instagram and stuff like that. So the marginalization of the women point, re-marginalization, women are being re-marginalized. I have talked in greater length. I have wrote an entire article that how the entire healthcare system is gendered in Outlook. You just need to search in Outlook by my name, it will come out, and I have discussed that in greater length, that how the re-marginalization is being sanctioned by the religion, and then it has been picked by the men, and women are being marginalized further. You read the creation of patriarchy by Garda Lerner, you will get to know that she has discussed this at greater details, and readings like Bell Hooks and others, Angela Davis. So this is it. Yeah.
So, two more questions we can take, I guess. Abhirbhav Bhattacharya, he is asking regarding women, which women are you addressing? Because there are several layers within this category of women. And does a subaltern woman really bother about daily domestic violence? Do you really think that these women organizations are reaching to those points until something very brutal is happening or the media has covered? Or are they actually hovering around the elite urban reality?
Okay. Uh, mm, uh, what is the point that he said? I was thinking something else. The,
Yeah, he's
the,
talking about that.
whether I'm I could recollect. Yeah. So the point is that can we categorize women? Yes, women are not homogeneous whole, as no community is. So you for example, in a religion called Hinduism or in Islam, everyone is not at the same par. It goes without saying, right? So now, but we could not come to a position in India, for example, or in the Indian subcontinent, where we can really categorize the women segment so bluntly, right? So because there are quite a thinner lines when you categorize women. Of course, there is a double-edged sword for the Dalit women, the subaltern women, because not only that they are women, but they are also lower caste women. So there is this double edge, which is hanging always. Those of you know Jessica Dutt's book coming out as Dalit, you just read that book. She has explained in greater details that how it is very difficult to be a Dalit woman in Indian society. But broadly the women, there are several platforms are being established, but they are not really responsive to the domestic violence or the violence that women are facing in the lockdown, or normally, for example, I know a few cases where some of the women committed suicide because of the violence that is being committed by their husbands, right? So this is something that happened in some parts whom I know. Now the point is that are we doing enough? We have never done enough, right? You look at the university spaces, you look at the institutions, you look at the healthcare, policy making areas, you look at the representation of the women and representation of the Dalit women. Since it's a cleavage society, a society which is segregated on the basis of cleavages, we need to sort of give representation on the basis of their actual numbers in the society, right? So we are not really doing enough, but then women are not homogeneous whole, but women in general, they are suffering like hell, and it has amplified during the pandemic situation. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope there are no more questions. If any resource persons wants to ask any question. Okay, now we will go to the next part of our session. Is Shopon sir there? Okay. Now we have reached the last part of our today's session, and I would like to invite our very own Shopon Kumar Majhi sir, who is not only the head of the Department of Mathematics in Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, he's also a very favorite person and he is the senior most faculty of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya. Over to you, sir, for your welcome, for your thanks, vote of thanks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, DDT.
Sir, can you just put the camera a little bit higher? একটু উপরে, হ্যাঁ. Perfect, perfect.
Thank you, DDT. And namaskar to everybody and good afternoon. I welcome you all to this session linked with this international webinar on post-lockdown political and economic situation in the context of COVID-19, an analytical discussion organized by the Department of Political Science of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, Panchmura. The activities of the first days has come to the concluding stage. I deem it a great favor for me that the organizing committee has given me the opportunity to deliver the vote of thanks to all concerned. It is needless to mention that how the people of different countries are passing days in panic atmosphere after the outbreak of the killer virus COVID-19, a pandemic plague. The progress in every sphere of life, including education, has got remarkable impediment. However, like other countries, the central and state administration of India have come forward jointly with their responsible components and trying hard for the deliverance from such dreadful danger and taking measure to minimize the damages. Amid this constrained situation, one such innovative and effective measure taken by the persons of the educational field is to continue imparting lessons to the students through online and organizing webinars. The last one is a very good substitute of the seminars and accomplishing the timely intellectual job without sustaining any loss. Today, you have listened 3 discourses relevant to the present situation from 3 distinguished speakers who are Dr. Ajay Gudabharti, Associate Professor, Center for Political Studies, JNU, New Delhi, Dr. Abdul Alim, Professor, Department of Law, Rajshahi University, Bangladesh, and Professor Subhajit Noskar, Associate Professor, Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University. I, on behalf of the members of the organizing committee, the members of the Staff Council of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, extend our heartfelt congratulations, gratitudes, and a lot of thanks for giving us consents to be the resource persons of the international webinar amid their busy schedule and for delivering their valuable speeches. Next, I would like to extend our warm greetings and thanks to the participants of this international webinar from here and abroad, and hope that they have enjoyed the speeches and are enriched and are thereby enriched. Finally, I must mention the names of our principal, Dr. Onal Bishwas, who is always an energetic patronizer for such activities. I extend my thanks to him. My thanks to the convener of the webinar and HOD of the Pol Science Department, MS Sugandha Rai, and to MS Didheti Datta, the organizing secretary, also monitoring the proceedings of the with technical expertise. I also extend my thanks to the IQAC of the Mahavidyalaya for its constant encouragement, the members of the Staff Council of Panchmura Mahavidyalaya, by whose active cooperation and patronage this webinar has come to life. Thank you all, and before concluding, I request you all to join the program tomorrow at the scheduled time. Thank you again. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Shanu, we can log off right now.
Okay.